We go. You're with me, Patrick. Christys on GB News. Coming up, the UK has narrowly avoided falling into recession in 2022. That's what the new figures from the ONS show. But the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has warned, we're not out of the woods yet. We're not out of the woods yet. Is it time to end all of this doom and gloom? We have done better than people anticipate. Although, of course, our very own economic and business guru, Liam Halligan, he was saying that we're all too gloomy to begin with. We'll find out why we've managed to swerve a bit of a recession very, very shortly. Oh, and also, just before that as well, we will be debating whether or not we should send the Navy into the Channel. And you can thank Lee Anderson for that one.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update. Not much rain around this weekend, not a huge amount of sunshine either. It will be fairly cloudy, but for most of us it'll be a bit warmer than it has been for much of this week. Here's the reason for the dry weather, a big area of high pressure. But notice the isobars closely packed together across the north. It is very windy out there at the moment, and this weather front is still bringing some outbreaks of rain to the highlands of Scotland. That'll last for much of the evening. Still very gusty as well over northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The winds will slowly ease through the night. Further south, the winds are light. We could see a bit of mist and fog, but generally this cloud keeping the temperatures up well above freezing. We'll start the weekend at some 6s and 7s for most. So, as I said, much milder than many a morning has been this week. It will be a fairly grey day tomorrow, lots of cloud. We may continue to see some light rain and drizzle here and there, the hills of Wales, some western coasts, the highlands of Scotland, but for most it will be dry. And we should see something a bit brighter as well as the day goes on, the cloud breaking a little bit to reveal a little bit of blue sky here and there. And it will be quite mild for February, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13 degrees Celsius. Not a great deal of change during Saturday night. So if you're heading out, dry and predominantly cloudy, keeping things reasonably mild. Any breaks in the cloud could again allow temperatures to dip maybe close to freezing. And the thick cloud in the northwest of Scotland, where there will still be a brisk breeze blowing, may produce the odd spot of drizzly rain as we go into Sunday. But for most, again, the wind's light on Sunday, so lighter than today, and just a lot of cloud around, certainly over central and eastern parts further west and across parts of Scotland. Better chance on Sunday of seeing some longer spells of sunshine. And again, it will be on the mild side with temperatures mostly 9 to 11 degrees Celsius. That's all from me for now. Goodbye.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, people, action-packed end of hour, another half hour coming up your way. Actually, we've got forensic psychologist on to talk about the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. What's the latest on all of that? Still, unfortunately, anyway, no sign of her. We've also got our People's Poll results, which shows that people are pretty split when it comes to trusting what party on Brexit. In light of the fact that you might have missed this, but we've paid the EU 2.3 billion large today. Why? I'll tell you. And also as well, Navy frigates in the Channel. Lee Anderson's calling for that. He says that we want to put Channel migrants on Navy frigates, send them back to Calais and have a standoff with the French. Big Lee's got that view. We'll talk about all of it. But in other news, the UK has narrowly avoided a recession, as the latest GDP figures published today show. But the UK recorded no growth in the final quarter of last year. And whilst the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt praised the economy as being more resilient than many feared, he did stress that Britain's not out of the woods yet. With me now is Jasmine Birtles, who is a personal finance expert. Jasmine, thank you very, very much. Well, it's been reported as well we've narrowly missed recession. We've just missed it, but we did, and this is a good thing, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, yeah. It certainly is a good thing, particularly because not only people in this country, but people around the world, particularly the IMF, have been saying, oh, the UK economy is in a terrible state. It's the worst in the G7. Essentially, we're not going to cope. And the inference, sometimes said, sometimes not said, is that it's because of Brexit.
OK, all right. But this is now what? A bit of a shot in the arm for Brexit Britain?
Yeah, I think it is, actually. It's certainly a shot in the arm for businesses generally, because certainly we've been told over and over that things are terrible, people are not going to spend. And we see, frankly, it is difficult for a lot of people. I mean, I deal with personal finance on the whole. I'm talking to people, who read my website, Money Magpie, or my column in the Daily Mail, who are struggling. So if they're struggling to deal with basic day-to-day bills, then that does mean that they have little or no money extra to spend on fun things, to spend in the shops, spend in the restaurants, cafes, clubs, theatres, etc. So generally speaking, that means that the economy at large is going to suffer. So the fact that, that we've even just stayed at a level rather than going down is frankly a really good sign.
But also I did hear quite a few Labour MPs piping up on the airwaves earlier on, and they were saying, wow, look, this isn't a win at all, this, because we've just been flatlining, it's been stagnant, they can't bracket this as a win, look at us. And then what they always say, and this gets me, is they go, well, look, for the last 2 and a bit years, it's been a nightmare. Well, yeah, it has. We were locked down for a lot of that. We had to pay for vaccines. We had to pay for all sorts of stuff. Putin's rolled the tanks into Ukraine. People were also moaning about the damage, and I'm air quoting now, that Liz Truss had caused to our economy. And still, we've not gone into a recession. So some people would argue that this is a bit of a win. But what's to come? I want you to look into your crystal ball for me and tell me what's round the corner.
Oh, good question. Oh, yes, absolutely. We should come back in 12 months' time and go, Jasmine, you said this.
We will dredge this clip up, I promise you. So go on, you better get it right.
Yeah, don't I? Well, it's going to be a mix. How about that for a good answer? It's going to be a mix of good and bad. I think that we are going to see in the short term a reduction of inflation, but I think that's a short term thing. What I mean by short term is I think 6 to 12 months. I think after a while, we're going to see prices come back up again later on. And that's largely because of the huge amount of money printing that went on over the last 2 or 3 years, which should never have happened in my view. I think we are going to have some issues, perhaps, again, short term with property, but I think that's going to improve. And I think people are going to be buying houses, buying flats again. So I think gradually we will pick up, but it's going to be a gradual thing. And I think there's going to be a lot of ups and downs in it.
OK, indeed. And yeah, just for some facts and figures for people, they say that inflation, that's obviously the rate at which prices are rising, is slowing. But at 10.5%, it remains close to a 40-year high. On Friday, which is today, the ONS also revised up its figures for the July to September quarter to show that the economy shrunk by 0.2% instead of the previous estimate of a 0.3% fall. Now, in case you didn't know, economics is not necessarily my strong point. My bank manager will tell you that. It reminds me, I need to pay the bank manager now. But, Jasmine, in terms of us talking ourselves down as a country, which I think we're doing quite a lot, and we've done it, frankly, throughout... Britain wouldn't survive during Brexit. We were the worst people. We got the highest excess death rate to COVID. That was absolute rubbish, by the way. We're not doing enough on the world stage. Britain's never doing enough for every single crisis. And now people are saying, well, we've just avoided recession. Does it actually damage confidence in Britain when we see this? Because I saw that various different high-tech companies, AstraZeneca, for example, not everyone's favourite company, to be fair, but AstraZeneca have decided to go and build a new headquarters in Ireland and not here because of tax rates, etc. So does us talking ourselves down and having high tax actually damage us?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. Both those things. So talking yourself down, as with an individual, so with a country or a company, you're going to get what you expect. You're going to get what you put out. So if we're constantly saying that, and also listening to other countries saying, oh, you're not going to be any good because of Brexit, because we're getting it from America, we're getting it from Europe, getting it from all sorts of places saying, oh, because of Brexit, you're not going to be able to cope. It's not true. It literally isn't true. I mean, I've heard a few years ago, some American, I can't remember who it was, but it's an American commentator saying that Britain wouldn't be able to cope because it would have huge amounts of unemployment after Brexit. Well, no, not at all. We can't get enough people in. That's really the situation.
Well, there we go. I'm going to have to nip in now, Jasmine. I could listen to you all day, but we do have to keep it moving, I'm afraid. Thank you very, very much. Jasmine Birtles there, personal finance expert, just reacting to the fact that things aren't necessarily as bad as we thought they were economically. Look, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, a friend of Nicola Bulley, who's the missing mum of two, has described waiting for answers on where she is as almost like torture. When I come back, we will speak to a forensic psychologist about what might have happened to her. Also, as well, a big Tory row brewing about whether or not we should send the Navy into the Channel. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Now it's your headlines.
It's 3:33, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The death toll has risen to more than 22,000 following Monday's devastating earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Rescue workers say what they call the golden period for finding survivors is closing. Amongst the devastation, though, glimmers of hope. 4 days on, a 10-day-old baby has been rescued along with his mother. Back here, an appeal by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has raised more than £30 million in its first 24 hours. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, though, says rescue efforts aren't going as fast as he'd hoped.
Despite the fact that we've gathered perhaps one of the largest search and rescue teams to the region, with more than 141,000 members, unfortunately, it's a fact that we've not been able to respond as fast as we'd hoped.
In Syria, the head of the White Helmets response group has accused the UN of failing to deliver aid to rebel-held areas. He's called the response catastrophic, claiming the region hasn't received any support since the disaster struck. At least 3,000 people are known to have died in the country. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad visited a hospital in Aleppo this morning in his first reported trip to the affected region. Back here, the Chancellor has warned the UK isn't out of the woods yet. It's after the latest figures show the economy narrowly avoided falling into recession in the final quarter of last year. The data from the Office for National Statistics reveals the economy saw zero growth between October and December. The final month of 2022 saw GDP down by 0.5%. But overall, the annual GDP grew by 4.1%. The Chancellor has welcomed the figures but warns there's still more to be done.
Well, the fact that we have avoided recession, in fact we're the fastest growing major country last year, shows there is underlying resilience in the UK economy. But we are not out of the woods. Inflation is still much too high. That is causing pain for families up and down the country, which is why we need to stick to our plan to halve inflation. If we do that and play to our strengths in science and technology, we really can be one of the most prosperous countries in Europe.
TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh yes, already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tomorrow at 8 p.m, tune in to a GB News Investigates documentary as we tell the full story of the grooming gang scandal.
My childhood has been stolen.
We will expose the cover-ups that have kept this national scandal under wraps for decades.
Not one person has been held accountable.
Our investigation uncovers the true scale of this outrage.
I want to see senior officials held legally to account.
On GB News, grooming gangs, Britain's shame.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. I've got some breaking news now, actually, and it's just been announced in the last few seconds that the RMT union has rejected the latest offers from both Network Rail and the train operating companies. The union has announced that. We'll get a bit more detail on that and drill down into exactly what those offers were, really, because it's not just about pay, it was about conditions as well. So, like I said, when we get that info, we'll bring it to you. But the crucial point there is it's been rejected, so it almost doesn't really matter anyway. Anyway, it's now been 2 weeks since the mother of two, Nicola Bulley, sadly disappeared near St Michael's on the Wire in Lancashire. And as police ramp up all their efforts to try and find her, with extending search efforts as well, they've now spread them out to sea. There have been numerous theories circulating the internet as to what could possibly have happened to Nicola. Joining me now is Dr. Kerry Nixon, a consultant forensic psychologist. Thank you very, very much. And we're now, I think, 14 days into this now, and certainly right at the start of it, everyone absolutely right not to speculate. The police pretty adamant, as they still are, that Nicola fell into the river and whatever else had happened after that. And certainly we don't want to delve into the realms of vile speculation and finger-pointing, but at the same time, this is a case that's gripped the nation and, well, frankly, the point of speculation is quite massive. So, Kerry, in your capacity as a forensic psychologist, what do you make of the theory that Nicola fell into the river?
I think it's very important what you've just said, though, is that we can't speculate. You know, the police are led by the information they have at the scene and the information that they get from witnesses, and we need to let the police do their job. However, it's seeming that at the moment, with the specialists that have been searching the river, that they've not found Nicola. So that begs the question, where is she? She can't just disappear. So now they are, looking at, there's things that the police are looking at. There's the gap on the day between when she was last seen and when she was reported missing. Also today, there's new information that's come to light in terms of the sighting of a red van. So there does appear to be some other avenues that the police are exploring, but their work hypothesis is still that she's in the water.
Look, what I think is interesting is that, like you've rightly identified there, for days I was being told, we were all being told by police, there's this 10-minute window. We can't account for this 10-minute window. Well, today I woke up and there's a 2-hour window, supposedly, and then there's this talk of this red van, and there was only initially one CCTV black spot, as it were. Now I'm reading that there's 3 of them. The big thing for me, though, on this is, could someone really be so utterly meticulous as to have found all these CCTV black spots and then managed to evade the full might of Ring doorbells and police investigations and all of this in terms of if she was taken? I mean, it would be have to be almost an expert in this kind of stuff, wouldn't it?
It seems absolutely unlikely, hence why the police's working hypothesis is that she fell into the water because of that very reason, that a woman walking along, doesn't just disappear. We have a lot of CCTV now. We have people with, phones. We have, as you said, dash cam footage. So it seems implausible that she would just disappear. But, in an investigation, you also can't be closed off to other avenues. And this van sighting has to be explored, and the gap has to be explored. And that's what the police are doing today with the new information coming to light.
Yeah, indeed. And can I just ask you just a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, in terms of what is a consultant forensic psychologist? What kind of things are you looking at?
Oh, I do lots of different things. So I work on risk assessment of offenders, treatment of offenders. I do a lot of work for the courts, doing assessments of different types of people, murderers, sex offenders, and I also work with the general population in terms of mental health as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm also just keen, just lastly, if you don't mind, is, look, another point on this is that the question marks over, well, could Nicola really have decided to disappear herself in that sense? And that is something that's been floated around. Clearly, the police don't think that's the case at all. People are saying, well, it would be incredibly unlikely, Kerry, she's got a couple of kids and it's not the kind of thing that anyone really do. She was on a works call, etc. Your views on that side of it?
Absolutely. I agree that just not seem like a possibility. When you look at when somebody disappears, you look at the person, you look at things that are going round in the person's life. The fact that she dropped her children off. Where was she going that day? Plans that she had. And, the police will have done that. They will have looked at everything that was going on in her life. and come to the conclusion that it's highly unlikely that she would disappear from on her own behalf. That seems very, very.
The whole thing, Kerry, is incredibly unlikely, isn't it? You know, even the police, and that's what makes it such a gripping case for the nation. And I think why people are so invested in this is just that even the idea of the most likely option, supposedly, of her going in the river, but then now not being found and managing to supposedly take a route that would seem incredibly unlikely in order to make it out to the Bay Area and stuff. I mean, every different element of this just is so unlikely. But Dr. Kerry, thank you very much. Dr. Kerry Nixon, a consultant forensic psychologist. That's the latest on the Nicola Bulley case. And sadly, there's not really much more info than that at the moment, other than the fact that the police are now saying, and relatives are now saying, that there's a 2-hour window that they're looking at. Of course, that was initially just 10 minutes, so that's a bit rum if you ask me, but also as well, there's 3 CCTV black spots as opposed to just 1, so it is very much developing, and a sighting of a red van, but that is the latest on that. We're moving on. Now, it's time for our GB News People's Poll. Yeah, that really adds to the drama, doesn't it? This week, we've been asking the public which party they think would handle Brexit better. The results are very close, with 17%, that's 1-7, saying that Labour would manage Brexit the best, and 16% saying the Conservatives. 40% aren't sure either way. So there's a Rizzler paper between it, ladies and gents. So, could you now trust the Labour Party with Brexit? That's the big question. Here to go toe-to-toe is Belinda de Lucy, former Brexit Party MEP and political commentator, and of course, Peter Edwards as well, former editor of Labour List. Peter, I will start with you. Could we trust Labour with Brexit? What does that really mean?
Yeah, I think that's part of the line in the sand drawn by Keir Starmer. You know, he said on day one to respect the result of the referendum. Labour flirted with the idea of single market and customs union several years ago. That's been dropped. And really, as you know, we've talked about lots of the seats in the so-called Red Wall in the north of England. They used to vote Labour. They were concerned over Brexit, but actually Labour lost a bit of support from about 2005 onwards. So Keir Starmer, projecting an air of competence, but also honesty and consistency of the referendum result, is all part of that rebuild.
Belinda, I'll throw it over to you, because from where I'm sitting, we kind of know we can't trust the Tories with Brexit because they've been in, and many would argue they've not really delivered Brexit.
Yeah, so I can understand why people feel like they can't trust the Conservatives, because they've had to be in leadership, so they've actually been tested with it. However, I would say there are a huge amount of Conservative MPs in Parliament that deeply believe in Brexit and the UK making its own laws, whereas when it comes to trusting Labour, I trust Keir Starmer with managing Brexit as far as I would trust Michel Barnier with managing Brexit. There has been absolutely no evidence to show that in Keir's actions to show that he's suddenly a convert. This is a man that was so strongly believed in the EU. He was prepared to rerun the Brexit referendum before it had been implemented and campaign for Remain. This is a man who voted 48 times against UK withdrawal legislation. This is a man who said in 2020 that he would defend EU free movement, and now he's saying it's a red line. The only reason Keir is saying this is because he thinks that's what people want to hear. You can never change someone who believes in the EU to being a Brexiteer. Look what Theresa May did. She voted Remain, and she didn't manage Brexit. She nearly destroyed it.
To be honest with you, I've come close to just banning that lady's name on this show in the past, actually, but we can't do that, apparently. We can't do that. Peter, I just want to get from you on this, because the point there that Belinda was making, which is, in a nutshell, essentially, at least Rishi Sunak voted for Brexit. Keir Starmer certainly didn't, and, well, massively flip-flopped on the issue of whether or not we should go back in. I'm just reading reports here as well of an unnamed shadow cabinet colleague of Keir Starmer saying, over the long run, I can see Britain being a member of the EU again. And realistically, I think it's hard for the public, isn't it, to believe that Keir believes that we're better out.
I don't think that's the right premise. I think the premise is there's been a referendum with a record-breaking turnout, and Keir Starmer said he accepts the result. And, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, the Labour Party was being attacked by the same people, but for the opposite reason, which was about whether it could forge economic links through things like the Customs Union. Now it's not saying that. The same people, including Reform Party and Brexit Party, are attacking them for saying something different. The other point I'd make really goes to competence, which is, I had a quick look, there was a YouGov poll in January and shows Labour not just ahead on the economy and on the NHS, but even with a narrow lead on the issue of asylum and immigration, which will come as a little bit of a surprise. Yeah, but doesn't it show that competence radiates and incompetence across the government is contagious?
Peter, I'll stick with you before I give the final word to Belinda on this. I'm quite keen to get your take now as somebody who is former editor of Labour List. I'm just going to double-check before I ask, did you vote Remain? Yeah?
I vote Remain, yeah.
Right, so now you are the kind of person, right, who the British public will be looking at and go, OK, you Labour supporter, voted Remain. But if you were to come into power now, we would have to trust you to make the best of Brexit. What would you do, Peter, to make Brexit a success?
I think, first of all, you have to respect the result. But secondly, I think we need much closer economic and social links with Europe. And that's not about going back in. It's not about another vote. But as things like the small boats crisis have shown us, it's actually in all our interests to work with neighbouring countries rather than have a confected row for party political gain.
OK. Belinda, final word to you. I suspect that's where a lot of people might be a little bit miffed, which is that I don't know whether or not the Labour angle on making a success of Brexit does appear to be, let's try and get closer to the EU a bit.
Yes, that's what I mean by Labour managing Brexit in the same way as if we handed it to Michel Barnier. It would be keeping close alignment. Tony Blair, Institute for Global Change, came out with a paper recommending UK ministers had the power to realign our laws with EU laws. It makes it much easier to slip back.
He's not he's not a Labour MP. He's not a Labour MP.
Competitive. I don't trust Labour at all, at least with the Conservative Party. Yes, they've been disappointing, but they are fighting a battle against the civil service. Many of them are. Labour would kneel down to the civil service and would be back in the EU within their second term.
Yes, wouldn't be the first time that Keir Starmer has taken the knee, to be fair. But Belinda, thank you very much. Belinda DeLucy, former Brexit Party MEP and political commentator. And, of course, Peter Edwards as well, former editor of Labour List. Cheers, both of you. Thank you very much. Right, OK. Now, this is a big one for us as well, because Tory... We heard a little bit about the small boats crisis being mentioned there, but Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson has called for migrants who illegally crossed the Channel to be returned to France the same day aboard a Navy frigate warship. The Royal Navy has been responsible for operations tackling the small boats crossings for the last 8 months, apparently, but it's now handed responsibility over to the Home Office. Rishi Sunak has made tackling the crisis one of the 5 priorities, which he can just condense back into 3, but there we go, of his premiership. But so far, the number of arrivals has only continued to grow. And by the way, the estimates are that it could be double last year's, which I think a lot of us would agree is shocking, really. With me now is immigration lawyer Dean Morgan. Dean, thank you very much. Just in terms of the law, could we put a load of Channel migrants on a warship and send them back to France?
Well, my concern about using a warship is that, you know, our armed forces are being trained to kill. They're trained to defend us and to fight a foreign enemy. The migrants that are crossing, whilst there may be economic migrants, they're not the enemy of the UK. And so that's, if you look at America, they have a US Coast Guard for a reason. They separate the US Navy, which is obviously to protect against foreign enemies, and their Coast Guard. So I don't understand why this isn't a border force issue and why the border force doesn't have cutters that could, like the US does with Cuban migrants that come across to Florida, do the same thing, because it's a policing issue, not an armed force issue.
Yeah, I suspect the argument that Lee Anderson would make, well, of course he's not here, but would be that in some weekends you can have upwards of 1,200 people crossing the Channel. And so we don't necessarily have the border force ships or the Coast Guard ships of that particular size. I do also think the point that he's making is that a warship, basically, would be a visible symbol of a deterrent. And as long as it isn't shooting at people, which, let's be honest, it's not going to, is that such a bad thing?
Well, I mean, last January, obviously, the Royal Navy was pushing back against, because this story comes up from time to time over and over again. The Navy's going to get involved, the Navy doesn't get involved. You know, it goes back to the Home Office, it comes back to the Navy again. Then they get an agreement with France, nothing ever happens with that. And you can't really blame the French, can you? Because if we can't be bothered to, you know, defend our shores, why should they do it for us? So, but the problem for me is that would it not be more of a deterrent if there were dedicated Coast Guard ships patrolling the Channel 24/7 with the latest equipment? Because the government has enough money to do it. They showed that with the pandemic. They showed that with the conflict in Ukraine. The money printer goes.
I get what you're saying, and it's an important distinction, that, because the way that our Coast Guard is behaving at the minute is that they are essentially, in my view, a bit of an Uber service for Channel migrants, OK? The other point in this, not to get too bogged down in the optics of a warship, the other point really is about towing boats back to France and then having a standoff with the French. And can we do that? So forget the warships, forget anything. It's Channel migrants in some form of vessel being towed back into French waters and presumably just dropped off at the beach in Calais.
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, that's an extreme measure for us to take, and obviously we can expect French pushback on that. I mean, really, we need to reach an agreement with France where we're not asking them to do everything. We do it all ourselves. It's in our self-interest to do that, but to have an agreement with them where they accept them back rather than just dump them at sea and just leave them to drift off into the Atlantic. I mean, that's unacceptable.
Yeah, and I think that what Lee Anderson was saying, if I've got it correct, is that it would be basically a knock on the door to the French saying, look, we're here with a load of people on this boat right now and these are your problems, so we're coming in whether you like it or not. And presumably then, once they're back in French waters, if they had to call an immigration lawyer, it wouldn't be you, Dean, would it? It would be a French one.
That's correct, yeah. It would be under French and EU, well, it'd be under EU law, so they would be, you know, making claims under EU law. I mean, you know, this, to be honest with you, the migrant crisis is global, whether it's South Americans going to North America, whether it's Africans coming to Europe. There needs to be international agreements on this, because until there is, you're just going to have this back and forth, and it's just going to get worse.
Dean, thank you very much. Great stuff. Dean Morgan there, who's an immigration lawyer. One thing I must say I think is fascinating about that is about the idea that if we do tow them back into French/EU waters, then it does legally, according to that immigration lawyer, become a French/EU problem. And their law, I suspect, would say that they are perfectly entitled to stay in another EU country. So maybe Lee Anderson has absolutely cracked it. It's me, Patrick Christys. I'll be back in a tick.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update. Not much rain around this weekend, not a huge amount of sunshine either. It will be fairly cloudy, but for most of us it'll be a bit warmer than it has been for much of this week. Here's the reason for the dry weather, a big area of high pressure. But notice the isobars closely packed together across the north. It is very windy out there at the moment, and this weather front is still bringing some outbreaks of rain to the highlands of Scotland. That'll last for much of the evening. Still very gusty as well over northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The winds will slowly ease through the night. Further south, the winds are light. We could see a bit of mist and fog, but generally this cloud keeping the temperatures up well above freezing. We'll start the weekend at some 6s and 7s for most. So, as I said, much milder than many a morning has been this week. It will be a fairly grey day tomorrow, lots of cloud. We may continue to see some light rain and drizzle here and there, the hills of Wales, some western coasts, the highlands of Scotland, but for most it will be dry. And we should see something a bit brighter as well as the day goes on, the cloud breaking a little bit to reveal a little bit of blue sky here and there. And it will be quite mild for February, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13 degrees Celsius. Not a great deal of change during Saturday night. So if you're heading out, dry and predominantly cloudy, keeping things reasonably mild. Any breaks in the cloud could again allow temperatures to dip maybe close to freezing. And the thick cloud in the northwest of Scotland, where there will still be a brisk breeze blowing, may produce the odd spot of drizzly rain as we go into Sunday. But for most, again, the wind's light on Sunday, so lighter than today, and just a lot of cloud around, certainly over central and eastern parts further west and across parts of Scotland. Better chance on Sunday of seeing some longer spells of sunshine. And again, it will be on the mild side with temperatures mostly 9 to 11 degrees Celsius. That's all from me for now. Goodbye.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hey, it's 4 o'clock, it's Friday, and the weekend is nearly with us. You're with me, Patrick Christys, taking you all the way through until 6 p.m. Now, that little bit of breaking news we brought you earlier, some more updates. The RMT union has rejected a new offer from national rail and train operating companies, which was aimed at resolving this long-running dispute over pay, jobs, conditions, stopping the strikes. We all know the score by now. The union has said that it was seeking an unconditional pay offer, as well as job security agreements, and no detrimental changes being imposed on members' terms, conditions or working practices. So, a lot to unpack there, actually, and we'll be doing that very, very shortly. Nicola Sturgeon, though, moving on, could be out of step with Scottish voters on the trans issue. Who could possibly have thought that? That is according to damning new polling data from Unheard, and it's found that the most trans-sceptic communities in the UK are, wait for it, ladies and gents, drum roll please, in Scotland. Yes, there we go. That's despite Nicola Sturgeon pushing a radical trans rights agenda. We'll be speaking to the person behind Unheard's polling data, and that's next. Is training on the job better than going to university and getting a degree? So it's the old apprenticeships versus uni debate. It's National Apprenticeship Week. And to celebrate, we'll be debating whether it's really We'll be debating whether or not it's really worth forking out on tuition fees, or if you should just get a job and learn your trade on the fly, which I think we can all agree is what I've done with limited success. We will speak to the one and only Charlie Mullins about all of this. And do MPs deserve a pay rise? Yes, their wages are going up by 2.9%. It's just over 86,000. Well, I say 6.5 actually. Do they really deserve it? And if so, how much would you pay an MP? Should they turn the pay offer down? Send your thoughts through gbviews at gbnews.uk. What would you pay your MP? But right now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 4. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The number of people who've been killed following Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria has risen to more than 22,000. Rescue workers say the window for finding survivors is closing, but there are still glimmers of hope as several children have been pulled from the rubble today, including a 10-day-old baby and his mother, who were rescued after surviving 4 days in a collapsed building. An appeal by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has raised more than £30 million in its first 24 hours. Turkey's President Erdogan says rescue efforts aren't going as fast as he'd hoped.
Despite the fact that we've gathered perhaps one of the largest search and rescue teams to the region, with more than 141,000 members, unfortunately, it's a fact that we've not been able to respond as fast as we'd hoped.
In Syria, the head of the White Helmets response group has accused the UN of failing to deliver aid to the rebel-held areas. He's called the response catastrophic, claiming the region had not received any support since the disaster struck. At least 3,000 people are known to have died in the country. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has visited a hospital in Aleppo in his first reported visit to the affected region. And in the last half an hour, the RMT union has rejected the latest offers from both Network Rail and train operating companies in their long-running dispute over pay. The union's General Secretary, Mick Lynch, has called the offers dreadful. Meanwhile, ambulance workers in England have been striking today in their dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Around 15,000 staff have been taking part in the walkout, with Unison members balloting another 10,000 over the coming weeks. University employees are also on strike for the second day this week, with more than 70,000 staff at 150 universities taking action. The Chancellor has warned the UK isn't out of the woods yet, after the latest figures show the economy narrowly avoided falling into recession last year. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows the overall annual GDP rate grew by 4.1%, but the economy saw zero growth in the final quarter of 2022. Jeremy Hunt welcomed the figures, but warns there's still more to be done.
Well, the fact that we have avoided recession, in fact we're the fastest growing major country last year, shows there is underlying resilience in the UK economy. But we are not out of the woods. Inflation is still much too high. That is causing pain for families up and down the country, which is why we need to stick to our plan to halve inflation. If we do that and play to our strengths in science and technology, we really can be one of the most prosperous countries in Europe.
The government says it's been assured by every energy company in the UK that they will stop forcefully installing prepayment meters for vulnerable customers. The regulator, Ofgem, launched an investigation after reports not all suppliers were following the rules. Meanwhile, the Chancellor says there's no major new initiative to help those struggling with the cost of their bills when the price cap rises in April. Bills are set to increase from £2,500 to £3,000. Ukraine's Prime Minister says Russia has launched more than 50 missiles at the country today. Kyiv's Mayor Vitaly Klitschko claims 10 have been shot down over the capital. The attack has caused damage to power grids at 6 locations, but there are no confirmed casualties. Schools in Kyiv have been forced to evacuate and continue with their classes at an underground station. You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
OK, welcome back. Now, Scotland might not be totally in favour of Nicola Sturgeon's approach to transgender rights. A new poll from the publication Unheard has found that, in aggregate, Scottish people are also more trans-sceptical than English people. So this is a story that we've been covering quite a lot earlier on this week, certainly last week, and a little bit before that as well, where Nicola Sturgeon was looking to plough ahead, and the SNP looking to plough ahead, backed up by Labour as well, it must be said, and some Conservatives, about whether or not, and the Lib Dems, gosh, all of them basically, about whether or not basically there should be more rights for trans people to be able to assign their gender and their sex. And it led to a massive debate, didn't it, about what is a woman, as if that is a debate, but also about women's safety. Anyway, it's all been going on, despite the fact that last month the Scottish Parliament did pass this gender recognition reform bill. So that happened. Now, the legislation, which was blocked by Westminster, would have reduced the minimum age a person can apply for a gender certificate to 16. It would also have removed the need for a medical diagnosis and evidence of having lived for 2 years in an acquired gender. So, essentially, we can see farcical scenes like a male rapist who just puts a wig on and paints his nails and buys himself a handbag and a frock being sent to a woman's prison as a woman, and that's all fine. Nothing to see here. People, rightly, were angry. Joining me now is the man behind the poll. It's Freddie Sayers, who is the executive editor of Unheard. Freddie, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Just talk us through this poll before we chat about a bit of the wider issue to it here.
So this whole so-called trans issue, this question of gender recognition and whether people can identify differently, has become a bit of a culture war, and there's not very much good information about what people really think about it. So we conducted this massive poll with more than 5,000 people and have done a statistical analysis and applied to each of the 632 constituencies in the UK what they are most likely to think. And the results are really quite surprising. First of all, Scotland, which you might think of as sort of leaning left when it comes to a comparison with England, turns out is actually more sceptical about some of these trans issues than England. And of course, as you mentioned there in the introduction, Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish First Minister, has been really at the forefront of this issue, and they've really been talking about it for months. So I think it's possible to kind of suppose that the more people talk about it, the more it's in the news, the more it becomes a real world matter of law that might actually affect your life, the more skeptical and the more concerned people become.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the definition then of something that I think a lot of us have been saying for a very long time, which is politicians caving in to a very vocal flag-waving minority. And it is a minority.
Well, when you look overall at the whole country, it's quite interesting because people are not remotely, as the phrase goes, transphobic.
No.
There's a real bedrock of support for the ability of the small minority of people who do have gender dysphoria to identify as a different gender. And actually, that's across the country. And astonishingly, in every single constituency we polled, that same result is found. So it's a wash of green when it comes to the basic ability of people to change gender if they want. But when you ask about the practical effects, should trans women be allowed into reserved women's spaces, such as changing rooms and bathrooms, and of course, most controversially, prisons? The results are much more sceptical and quite clearly so. And then, of course, when you ask people about sport, it's even more so. In fact, there is literally one constituency in the whole country who tended to think trans women should be allowed in women's sport, and that was Manchester Central.
Yes, well, there you go. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who I know watch this programme every single day. They email me all the time. gbviews@gbnews.uk is awash with people saying, maybe I'm massively out of touch here. Maybe I'm just not with it. Maybe I'm of a certain age and I just don't understand what these newfangled gender issues are. And then you look at some cracking polling like we've got here from Unheard, and you look at who is least in agreement with transgender women, some people would just say men, being allowed to use spaces reserved for women, such as women's toilets or changing rooms. And the least in agreement in the country, we've got North Ayrshire, we've got Ayr, we've got Argyll and Bute, I've got Perthshire, somewhere I can't pronounce, Stirling, we've got one there in Wales, and Bartonshire, Ayrshire. You catch my drift, which is basically a load of these are in Scotland, which appears to be the place where they're pushing, the vast majority of them are pushing to try to get this stuff done. And that, some would argue, is political suicide.
I think it shows how problematic this could be for Nicola Sturgeon, definitely. It's already caused her some difficulties in the past weeks, but what it suggests, I think, is that the more people are exposed to it, because it can be this quite theoretical, strange question which a lot of ordinary people have never really thought about, at which point they don't have very strong feelings about it, but the more it's in the news and the more governments like the Scottish government trying to take forward actual changes to the law, people start to pay attention to it and they start to polarise. And that's definitely what we've seen in Scotland. So that's why 9 out of 10 of the constituencies that are most opposed are in Scotland.
OK, look, thank you very, very much, Freddie. Great stuff and great work on this poll as well. I would urge everyone to go and have a look at Unheard on this and just type in Scotland gender identity. Okay. You will find the results of this. And so when anyone ever just decides to shout at you in the street and say, oh, you're a massive transphobe, you can just look at this poll and go, actually, what I think is pretty much what most people think. Freddie, thank you very much. Freddie Sayers, the executive editor of Unheard. Right, now, with me is Neil Hanvey, who's Alba MP for Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath. Neil, I believe is there. Yes, is he? Let's bring Neil into the fray. He's there. Hey, good man. All right. Well, thank you very much. Now, this poll, I think, is a representation of what a lot of people suspected was the case. And the reality is now that Nicola Sturgeon and co cannot stand up and say anyone who disagrees with me is on the wrong side of history and is a massive transphobe. Because, actually, it's kind of most people, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really difficult journey for those of us who've been trying to address this problem in a constructive way for the last 3.5 years. None of this is a surprise. I've said this to you before, Patrick. But what we've effectively seen is such a vicious campaign led by people who claim to be trans rights advocates or allies, and pushing an agenda that is done in such an aggressive way that it is actually making people less sympathetic to the plight of people with gender dysphoria, and it seems to have, gone into the public consciousness, particularly on the back of the.
Neil, one thing that really winds me up, Neil, about all of this, and it really does, is that whenever anyone gets any pushback on any of these woke issues, they try to call you a transphobe, or they try to call you a racist, or they try to say whatever, and then they always go, oh, you know what? Look, it's whipping up all this hatred. But actually, what this poll does is really shoot that down, because when people right across the UK are asked, should people be able to identify to being a different gender to the one that they were at birth? Basically, do you care if I said I was a woman now? And basically, net agree is everywhere, and they're coloured that in green, and that's right across the UK. So people don't care. People do not give a stuff whether or not I said I was a woman. What they do care about, what they really care about, is that they don't think I should be allowed into a women's changing room. And it's a question of safety. And that, I think, shoots down a lot of these people saying that it's about transphobia. It's not. It's actually about women's safety, Neil.
Well, I mean, it's actually wider than that, Patrick. It's about safeguarding more generally. And part of this whole narrative has been that anyone who says they're a woman is a woman, and that is fundamentally flawed. We've seen lots of concerns about young people being affirmed onto a trans journey only to regret that later once they've been exposed to cross-sex hormones and so-called puberty blocker chemicals. This is a really important issue to get right. It deserves to be treated sensitively. And unfortunately, the way that it's been handled has just been absolutely back to front. There are safeguarding concerns way beyond just women's rights. I'm not in any way diminishing that. That's the reason that I spoke out in the first place.
But Neil, I think you're absolutely spot on. The other, I would argue, the other safeguarding right is about kids. And we are hearing a lot, in fact, a book has been nominated for the Children's Book of the Year prize, which does include even a diagram of what appears to be a naked, quotes-unquote, girl talking about imaginary genitalia and all of this stuff. And people are concerned about this stuff being pushed onto kids. And when you look again at the polling data here, it's not necessarily about whether or not people should be allowed to identify as that, but it's about people using women's spaces. It's also about people taking part in women's sport, men taking part in women's sport. And it does make me wonder, when you look at this polling data, Neil, why is there the big push to make kids take part in things like big pride events or make them answer the questions to whether or not they've been born into the wrong body?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really deeply concerning, and this agenda has been pushed very forcefully by the Scottish Government over the last few years, including questions in the school census about sexual behaviour. You know, children need to be allowed to be children. You know, when my kids were 7 or 8, they would be, builders one moment, a princess the next. It didn't mean that they wanted to commit to that identity for the rest of their lives. It was a fantasy, and that's a normal part of childhood development. Introducing concepts like adult identity into a children's curriculum is really irresponsible. Children don't have the cognitive ability to transpose themselves into an adult identity. It's highly irresponsible, and the clinical staff who've been involved in some of the affirmative care that has led to young people effectively self-harming by mutilating their bodies when they weren't ready to make that decision really need to be held to account.
OK, Neil Hanby there, who's an Alba MP for Kirkcaldy and Cowden B. Thank you very much. Just reacting to the polling data that, frankly, will come as a big sigh of relief for a lot of people, that actually the vast majority of people out there think, I dare say, a bit like you and a bit like I, which is that, maybe men shouldn't be allowed into women's spaces. But there we go. Right, we're moving on, and it's this breaking news now because, as you just heard, the RMT has announced that it has rejected the latest offers from both Network Rail and the train operating companies. RMT boss Mick Lynch described the offers as dreadful. With me now to discuss this in more detail is GB News' national reporter, Paul Hawkins. Paul, thank you very much. So they've rejected it. What have they actually rejected? Do we know?
Right, yeah, let's remind you of the offer. So they've rejected the offer from Network Rail and from the train operating companies. They're represented by the Rail Delivery Group, kind of the overarching body. And effectively, both organisations, Network Rail and the Rail Delivery Group, had offered them 9% over 2 years. That's an improved pay offer of 1%. So 9%, 4 and 5%, one for the previous year, one for the year coming. OK, so 9% over 2 years. A guaranteed £1,750 payment for those who are on the lowest paid. No guaranteed redundancies until the end of next year. Previously, that was April next year. They kind of improved that offer towards the end of next year. And then in terms of the conditions attached, and this is key, it's not just about pay, it's also about conditions. The creation of multi-skilled station roles, the creation of station groups. So if one station was short-staffed, down the line from another station, staff from that station where they're properly staffed could then be moved. So moving staff around stations effectively. Part-time contracts, flexible working, and the formalisation of current voluntary working arrangements on Sunday. So it's conditions, it's pay. The RMT, unlike ASLEF, who just flat out rejected that group, ASLEF, which represents train drivers, the RMT went away and thought about it for a while. I spoke to Mick Lynch. He said, we're not standing up to applaud this offer, but we are going to think about it. So they went out on a kind of road show. They didn't officially ballot their members, but they kind of put it on a road show and consulted their members. And they've come back and they're not. They've said it. They've called it dreadful, effectively, and they're not accepting it. So there are going to be more talks. We don't have dates for those talks yet. I've spoken to the Department for Transport. We have a response from the Department for Transport on the way. One would have thought there'd also be a response from the Rail Delivery Group and Network Rail. So hopefully there will be more talks scheduled. But if those talks don't go to plan, then there will be more strike dates, and the RMT said that it will continue for as long as possible.
Right, OK, so just so I'm absolutely clear on this, so they were given or offered 9% over 2 years, split 9% over 2 years, some kind of guaranteed payment of £1,750, you said?
Yeah, for the lowest paid,
For the lowest paid. No enforced redundancies until the end of next year.
Instead of April.
Next
year.
OK, all right. And the formalisation of what sounded a bit like some kind of almost freelance part-time work that was taking place.
Yeah, kind of making it more flexible and trying to change the role so they're multi-skilled at stations, and then make rosters and job responsibility a bit more flexible so you can move people between stations.
OK, and so they've turned that down, which is interesting. Some people might say that was a decent offer, I suppose. Obviously, crucially, not the people who are in the unions at the minute. And go on.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, the key phrase, if we look at the statement from the RMT, is that the union has made it clear it is seeking an unconditional pay offer. Unconditional. So it's saying, well, OK, we can negotiate on pay, but we don't want these conditions attached to it. Now, the message from government, from the Rail Delivery Group, from Network Rail has always been there have to be conditions attached to this. You can't just talk about pay. There's got to be reform as well. The unions would say, no, we're open to reform as well, but we just think these conditions are unacceptable. But here they're talking about an unconditional pay offer.
That is fascinating. OK, and I suppose a little bit more detail on this essentially will come out in the wash. But, yeah, so basically just to take the money, have that pay rise, and not... Because from where I'm sitting, and this is why I'm not a union trade negotiator, of course, but from where I'm sitting now, the conditions that appear to be attached to this offer seem to be quite good conditions for the work, an improvement on the conditions that the workers already had.
Well, the pay is certainly better. They have watered down these conditions, but it's still not enough to meet the red lines that the trade unions have set up. So they would say, yeah, there's been some shift on it, but it's not where we think we need to be. Yeah, and then meanwhile, you know, the rail industry is using hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds. And of course, when we talk about trying to grow the economy, it's difficult to grow an economy when you can't get from A to B. We know the hospitality industry has lost, what, 2.5 billion, maybe even 3 billion by now. Who knows? But it's billions of pounds. And so all this money is being lost while this dispute continues.
Paul, thank you very, very much. Paul Hawkins there, our national reporter, just bringing you up to date on that breaking news about the RMT rejecting the latest offer. So, yes, we'll have more on that throughout the show, no doubt. Get your views coming in on that. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Fascinating stuff from Paul there with all that detail. You're with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, ambulance staff in London, Yorkshire, the South West, the North East and the North West of England. Just throw a dart at the map of England, you'll hit a strike. We'll speak to one of our reporters who's on a picket line there next. We're also going to be talking about loads. Lee Anderson's desire, apparently, to put Navy frigates in the Channel. Gosh, you couldn't make it up. Anyway, right, I'll see you in a sec.
On GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, I've got loads coming your way throughout the course of this hour. We are going to be talking about what's going on in the Channel. Lee Anderson is talking about putting Navy frigates in there, taking them back to France and just having a standoff with the French, which I think will be fascinating to actually see happen. We're also going to give you the latest on that interesting case, which appears to be unfolding as we speak, which is of a school in Surrey where there are black rights protesters outside, and it's all getting rather aggy, to say the least, in relation to an attack on a girl at that school. So we'll bring you the latest on all of that. But before it, Unison ambulance workers are staging strikes across England today. The union strike involves ambulance workers across 5 services in England: London, Yorkshire, the South West, the North East and the North West. Paramedics, they're caught up in a dispute over pay and staffing conditions. 70,000 university staff are also striking today across 150 universities in strike action called by the UCU in a dispute over lecturers' pay. Crimea River. Well, joining me now from London Waterloo Ambulance Station HQ is our reporter Ray Addison. Ray, oh yes, it's kicking off behind you. What's going on?
Yeah, it's busy here, Patrick. It's a lot louder than it was this morning. I reckon we've got about 50 ambulance workers here behind me, 50 to 60 or 70 or so, and they're really getting a lot of support, as you can hear, from the public. A lot of trucks, a lot of bus drivers, London bus drivers going past, tooting their horns, people on their bikes, people on their scooters, some people just walking past and clapping their hands in support for the strike action that's taking place here today. There's around 5,000 ambulance workers that belong to Unison in London, estimated that around 1,000 of them are on strike today. And of course there is backup plans in place when emergencies are happening. I've personally seen 2 groups of ambulance workers leave the picket line and go and attend to emergency cases if there hasn't been somebody else to respond. Now, joining me to talk about the strikes is Marcus Davis. He's been a paramedic for 23 years. He's also a senior rep with Unison. Marcus, thanks for joining us. Obviously, morale's quite high. Come a little bit closer, Marcus. Morale's quite high here, but what about morale overall among your colleagues?
Yeah, it's high across the ambulance service. Since we've started the industrial action, we've had an increase in membership. So we've recruited nearly 1,200 members since the end of last year to the present day. Which I think is fantastic. These are people that have joined us because they want to go out on strike. They want to support their colleagues. Pay is very important to them. It's a very emotive subject. And, you know, as you can see, we've got a very strong picket line behind us.
What does it mean to you to get so much support from members of the public going past?
I mean, it's great. This is the fourth one, and you know, you could be cynical and thinking that people would have a bit of striking overload. The public would then sort of become unsympathetic, but this isn't the case. As you can hear now, you know, people are tooting their horns. People are stopping to have conversations with us. The support is overwhelming.
So you've been working for 23 years as a paramedic. How have you seen the service change in the last 5 years or so?
Well, we've always had an increase in call rate. The types of job that we go to are different. When I first started, it used to be a lot more sort of life and limb cover anyway, emergency calls. Over the last few years, we're doing more sort of urgent calls, lower acuity calls, a lot of mental health calls. So in that respect, the types of jobs that we go to on a daily basis, I think, are different.
So in terms of the reason why you're striking, you've been offered, well, you received a 4% pay rise last September, it's around £1,400. Why is that not enough?
They actually, I think, awarded it earlier in the year. I mean, it wasn't enough then. And then since the cost of living has gone up, inflation has increased, that 4.5 figure is extremely low.
OK, Marcus, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it. Patrick, as you know, there's action taking place today, and the union bosses are saying that unless the government gets around the table, action like this is set to continue for the next few months.
Ray, thank you very much. Ray Addison there. Now, I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but just reacting to that, does it not stick in the craw somewhat when you see people who are as sympathetic as I am to people wanting the particular pay rise, and I think a pay rise is justified, absolutely, when it comes to healthcare workers. I don't think it should be way above inflation, simply because I don't think we can all afford it, OK? Because I think you'd have to give everyone the pay rise. But does it not make you feel a bit squiffy when you see people who are supposed to be saving lives currently, and you look at the state our NHS is in, and you look at the state of public health at the moment, and there's a jovial atmosphere? And I can't help but wonder whether people are driving past, they're tooting their horns, yeah, all right, you know, and they're all blowing their whistles and they're all clapping. Did your relatives need an ambulance today? I don't know. Did they? Because I don't think I would be clapping, particularly if that was the case. And then you look at the MP's pay rise and people will say, well, MPs are already paid a lot more, aren't they? And yeah, I get all of that. And MP's expenses. I think it's a little bit of a false equivalence because, frankly, I do really think that now, look, today alone, 137,000, get your heads around this, 137,000 non-urgent appointments are being cancelled as a result of the singular strike action that's taking place. That's in the NHS. We're also saying now that we'll go to life and limb calls. We'll go to life and limb calls. What the individual said there, from what I heard, is, well, we're having to do a lot of other stuff as well. We're having to do a lot of other things as well, to go to a lot of mental health issues and things. OK, well, you're not today, are you? And I get that maybe you didn't sign up to become a paramedic to go and nurse someone through a mental health crisis. And I do get that we need more mental health provisions in this country, and our paramedics and our police force shouldn't have to spend as much time as they do with people who aren't, you know, in urgent need. But at the same time, there will be people now sitting at home or out in the street, whatever, unable to get medical care as a result of this. And look, I don't know about you, maybe you're full square behind this stuff. And if you are, fine, I want to hear from you. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I am losing sympathy fast, singularly because I'm just looking at it right now. All these strikes are hemorrhaging us money and also now costing lives, unequivocally costing lives. And I just find that a little bit rum, and I don't like seeing people happy about it either. But maybe that's just me. Friday rant over with. Lots of you getting in touch, though, about your MP's pay rise. Guy says, oh, of course, our MPs are paid poorly. OK, here we go. Their salaries should be 200 grand to attract some of the best talents and skills in these islands. Yes, well, look, again, this is a tricky one because I would like to make the case that if you want to get the best and the brightest, then you need to pay them a load of money because these people could just leg it off into the city, collect half a bar, take it home in wheelbarrows, go out and do whatever they want on a Saturday night and not have to worry about, you know, a nasty Michael Gove-style picture of them popping up on Twitter. And I get all of that stuff. However, at the same time, you look at this crop of MPs and you think, do they deserve a pay rise? What are they doing? What have they done? It's all a bit of a shower. Lynn says, hi, Patrick. If MPs' pay was according to their ability, then they should pay the taxpayer, not the other way round. OK, Lynn, all right, fair enough. Well, look, you're with me, Patrick Christys on GB News. Coming up, we're moving away from strikes. I'm going to try and swerve it as much as possible, mainly because it's doing disasters for my blood pressure. But I will be asking if too many of our young people are going to university, whether they should be considering other options instead. An apprenticeship scheme. We've got a big debate on all of that. And yes, I'll be returning as well to that story that is frankly gripping people, not just in the inbox, but online as well, about a black rights group protesting right outside a school where a pupil was attacked. Family Forever, they're called. It's all a bit of a paramilitary-style affair, and yes, it's kicked right off. But now, there's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 33 minutes past 4. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The number of people who've been killed following Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria has risen to more than 22,000. Rescue workers say the window for finding survivors is closing, but there are still glimmers of hope as several children have been pulled from the rubble today, including a 10-day-old baby and his mother, who were rescued after surviving 4 days in a collapsed building. An appeal by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has raised more than £30 million in its first 24 hours. In Syria, the head of the White Helmets response group has accused the UN of failing to deliver aid to rebel-held areas. He's called the response catastrophic, claiming the region had not received any support since the disaster struck. At least 3,000 people are known to have died in the country. The RMT has rejected the latest offers from both Network Rail and the train operating companies. The pay deal was 9% over 2 years, but the union's General Secretary says it doesn't meet expectations on job security or working conditions. Meanwhile, around 15,000 ambulance workers in England have been striking today in their dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. And more than 70,000 staff at 150 universities are walking out for the second day this week. The Chancellor has warned the UK isn't out of the woods yet after the latest figures show the economy narrowly avoided falling into recession in the final quarter of last year. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows the economy saw zero growth between October and December. The overall annual GDP rate grew by 4.1%. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Tomorrow at 8 p.m, tune in to a GB News Investigates documentary as we tell the full story of the grooming gang scandal.
My childhood has been stolen.
We will expose the cover-ups that have kept this national scandal under wraps for decades.
Not one person has been held accountable.
Our investigation uncovers the true scale of this outrage.
I want to see senior officials held legally to account.
On GB News, grooming gangs, Britain's shame.
Yeah, one not to miss that, the grooming gangs investigation by Charlie Peters, 8 p.m. on Saturday. Just moving on, though, because MPs have called for an inquiry into a Surrey school. I know a lot of you feel very strongly about this. It's been doing the rounds massively on social media. It's filling my inbox as we speak. But a video emerged of a pupil being punched, kicked and having her hair pulled in what the police have now described as a, quote, serious racially aggravated assault. Well, the incident led to protests from the Thomas Knivet Scott College in Ashford from those who claimed that the school did not do enough to help the victim. Well, the school's head teacher, Richard Beeson, responded by saying all necessary steps were being taken to help the pupil. Now, obviously, some MPs, a cross-section of MPs, have got in touch with the Home Secretary. They're saying justice needs to be done, justice needs to be served. There is also, and this is, I think, one of the really key things for me about all of this, is a paramilitary style group called Forever Family. They're a black rights group who are wearing, from what I can gather anyway, what look like stab vests and almost kind of fake combat gear, who've decided to protest this school and call for the sacking of pretty much absolutely everybody. This group was founded in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests. They want reparations for the slave trade. Prominent rappers have got involved. And I'm just wondering, realistically, whether or not it's all going a bit too far. You know, there's a fight outside of school, as terrible that all is, and we'll have to wait and see as that investigation runs its course, of course. But the fact is, you know, do you mob up and go and protest outside of school? I'm not sure. Olivia Utley is in Westminster. Olivia, you have more of the details, I believe, of the political side of this. So MPs, for some reason, I'm not sure why, have decided to highlight this specific case and go to town on it with the Home Secretary. What's happening?
Yes, so essentially this horrific incident has, as you say, become a big story on social media, has sort of taken on a life of its own, as it were. And what we've seen today is a letter from a cross-section of MPs, mostly Labour MPs, a couple of Conservative MPs in there, and what it's asking for is two specific things. It's asking a request from the Home Secretary. It's asking the Home Secretary to look into the police response to this incident. At first, the Surrey police called it a fight between girls, which this group of MPs feels doesn't do justice to the situation. The Surrey police went on to say that it's a serious racially motivated attack, as you say. But that's the first investigation. Then the letter goes on to ask the Education Secretary to look into the safeguarding practices that the school has for black and Asian students, and this is where it really goes a step further, asks to consider disciplinary action for those teachers and members of staff who, it looks from the video, stood by and did very little when this attack was happening. I clarify, looks from the video, it's not clear exactly what happened. We don't know the full evidence. So that's quite a big step from this group of MPs. And one MP, the MP for Streatham, Belle Aribo, can't pronounce the end of her surname, but she's come forward on Twitter and actually called for the sacking of the teachers who felt that who she believes didn't do enough. So it's a pretty big intervention from this group of MPs. So far, the response from the Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, has simply been to say that the police investigation must run its full course. But as you say, it's interesting that this group of MPs have chosen to pick up this particular incident rather than other incidents of aggravated assault that have taken place in the country.
Yeah, Olivia, look, thank you very, very much. Olivia Utley there. She's in Westminster. She's our political reporter. And it is important to state, very important to state, which is certainly why I'm not reading emails out on this, there is an active case going on there, so we certainly don't want to pass comment on too many of the intricacies of what's happened, but you all get the gist, and I'm sure you've all seen the videos online. One of the concerns about all of this for me is the group Forever Family. It's a black rights group which has rocked up outside this school, and they are wearing like stab-proof vests and kind of paramilitary-style gear, body armour, walkie-talkies are there, and it's all quite intimidating. I understand that they feel incredibly passionately about this. They feel as though not enough action is being taken when it comes to racially related incidents, and clearly they feel like there's a wider societal problem, and they want to make a point out of this and try to make sure that this kind of thing allegedly doesn't happen again. Some people would say, is this a little bit of mob rule? You know, the police are there, aren't they? And is it right now that whenever an incident like this happens, a group of, I think it's fair to say, quite intimidating people in the sense of the way that they're dressed, rock up outside of school and call for the sacking of people and all of this? It doesn't sit too comfortably with me, but we'll have to wait and see, of course, this case rumbles on. Right, moving on. This week marks National Apprenticeship Week, where the education and skills sectors come together to encourage students to uptake apprenticeships to help provide life skills to young people looking to go into employment. Well, the number of people going into apprenticeships has been on the rise in recent years as more people are questioning the value of a university education, and attitudes, they're starting to change on the idea that everyone must have a degree, especially, I imagine, because the amount of debt that you rack up and the fact that lecturers are always on strike these days, it seems. But are apprenticeships now a better alternative than going to university? I thought, look, hey, on paper, this topic, it might look a bit dry. Well, let's spice things up. We are joined by founder of Pimlico Plumbers, Charlie Mullins. He thinks apprenticeships are great. And also, joining me now is political commentator and uni student is the wonderful Anna McGovern. Great stuff, both of you. Thank you very much. Charlie, I will start with you. Apprenticeships, there's a bit of a stigma about it. Why?
That's right. I think it's an old-fashioned idea where they say you should go to university and all that nonsense. But it's all old hat now. I mean, I think it's 47% of graduates don't get a job when they pass out. With an apprenticeship, you're going to be learning while you're earning. You've got an immediate job. There's a massive demand, massive skill shortage out there, and I think they should start, you know, from a school level now. You know, if they're not that sort of academic, then start teaching them the skills. Plumbing, carpentry, electrics, and you know, rather than get the GCSE, maybe get a skills certification that would give credibility to them, and also get them 1 year ahead in the workplace. And personally, I think it's a no-brainer. I think when Blair said 50% of people should go to university, I now think you would probably say maybe 20% people. Skills pay the bills.
Yeah, interesting stuff, and it's hard to argue. You certainly pay your bills, that's for sure. Anna. Well, university students, from where I'm sitting, seem to get shafted left, right and centre because you've had the issue with COVID where they're locked in dorm rooms, and then you've got lecturers going on strike now and you come out saddled with debt. Why is uni a good thing?
I mean, I think the kind of mechanism of university is a really beneficial thing for students to kind of pursue a topic that they're really passionate about. But I think it's kind of been taken over by kind of these bureaucratic sort of forces like the UCU deliberately targeting students' education. And then, like, for me, for example, I've not had a normal year at university that has not been disrupted by lockdown, by strikes. And I think for many young people, it kind of makes them question, what's the point of going to university? But I think there's many benefits to it as well, because especially when you're young, you don't necessarily know what path you want to take when you're young. And by pursuing a degree, it does open doors for some of those kind of job sectors where you do require a degree to get into that. But then I also agree that I think that it's kind of, society is changing and you don't necessarily need a degree for all jobs anymore.
I get you completely about that. It can buy you time. Now, Charlie, with the best will in the world, I was rubbish at every single practical trade I ever turned my hand to, briefly, OK? And I also didn't really know necessarily what I wanted to be when I was older. I mean, I'm not sure anyone would even call this a job, to be fair. But for me, going to university bought me a bit of time. It was expensive, but it bought me a bit of time. Do you think that that could be a good avenue for people, or do you think that more people should just be told, right, early doors, with respect, if you're not going to be like a nuclear physicist or something, why don't you, get a practical trade?
Yeah, look, again, it suited you, and you obviously had a few quid to be able to afford that.
I took a loan out, yeah.
Well, 50k, but a lot of people haven't got that, and I'm saying that, as society's changed, you need more and more sort of people with skills. I mean, evidently we've got to build 300,000 houses a year. And, bankers and finance people and accountants, they don't build houses with degrees.
Is it societal, though? Are people a bit too soft these days? Do you think people go, I don't actually want to get my hands dirty, young people, they just want to sit around on TikTok and get a job in recruitment?
Well, you just said it. I mean, exactly that. I mean, look, the other advantage of getting an apprenticeship is you learn life skills. I mean, sometimes you come out of university and, half of them can't sort of do their shoelaces up.
Yeah.
And the other half can't cross the road. And I don't necessarily mean...
I was going to say.
Shoes on. I'm trying to say to you, you learn life skills by doing an apprenticeship.
That's a good point as well, Anna. Does university actually prepare you for life?
I think for students, if you take the initiative and pursue work experience and job opportunities yourself, then you can build experience while doing your degree. So, for example, I've worked throughout my entire degree. I worked at a school and now working in PR and public affairs, and that's alongside my university study. So it definitely can be done. And I think with university as well, there's many, the universities, they put on, seminars, they put on, there's societies, for example, that introduce you to activities that you may not have, been able to be exposed to before when you're at school or otherwise. So I think university can kind of open doors to maybe kind of pursue interests that you may not have had the opportunity to do so if you weren't at university. And I think for many students as well, you get into so much debt. For many students, it's not an option to not work while you're doing your degree because they wouldn't be able to afford it otherwise.
Yeah, I get that. And Charlie, I think in this country now, it's just furthering what we were talking about earlier, I really do think there's a lot of people out there who are very, very soft. I mean, people are getting offended by non-hurty words. Yeah, exactly that. And actually, maybe spending a bit of time at somewhere like Pimlico Plumbers when they were 16, 17 or 18 might sort them out a bit.
Yeah, well, I think I'm agreeing with you, and I think you're agreeing with me. I think on the degree's not, there's life without a degree, and I think we just need to bring it in at school level. And I came out of an idea years ago when, I can't remember, Cameron was in power and Osborne. And I think that when students leave school, you should either have a job, go to university or go to a government-funded apprenticeship.
Yeah.
That will solve the skill shortage. It will stop crime on the street. I mean, you don't get people in jobs that go around stabbing people.
No, not really.
It's all about getting a job, and as much as this lady's saying she's a graduate and hopefully you'll get a job when you leave, but 47% of graduates will not get a job when they leave, which means they've wasted their time at university.
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's shocking actually that number. Anna, can I ask you, when you were finishing school and stuff, at that particular time, because this is how it was for me, it would have been unconscionable for me to have not gone to university. I went to a school where everyone was going to university, it was just the option. People would have looked at me like I was mental if I'd have said, I'm not going to uni. And, all right, I wasn't, like I said to Charlie earlier, I didn't show any aptitude, really, any practical stuff, going to be a mechanic or whatever, so that would have been equally mental. But did it ever even enter your head to not go to uni?
I think for me, university was always the path that I wanted to take. I studied, I had a really big interest in English, and that was something that I wanted to do at university level. Fortunately, with my school, when I was, studying in sixth form and everything, they were very much about bringing out the best and all the students. Not, university, it's not right for everyone. No. It's right for some people, but other people, if they want to do a very specific career that might not necessarily, need a degree for, apprenticeship might be the right route.
I just think as well, if you decide that you want to get an apprenticeship, you're accountable to a boss, right? And that boss might be someone like Charlie Mullins. Whereas if you're at university, you're accountable to a rainbow flag-waving unionist trot who can decide that they're going on strike left, right and centre. I'm just not convinced that's great. I've got some emails here and I'm going to put a couple of them to you, if that's all right. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on this apprenticeship debate. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Arnold says, hi, Patrick, I'm 20. I wouldn't want to do an apprenticeship. I looked at them, I would hate them. Now they're taking an axe to vocational learning in an educational setting. This country loves to overcorrect. Every school should have a shop class at GCSE, home economics, etc. Yeah, I get what you're saying there. And actually, Charlie, this kind of stuff I suspect you think needs to start way before university. You know, Rishi Sunak is going, all right, I'm going to hold a gun to your head and make you do maths until you're 18.
So
but,
wrong.
like you've just said there, people can't tie their own shoelaces or even put something up that they've bought in IKEA. What's the point?
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right there. Look, he's just coming out for people-pleasing. And also, you've got to remember, university is just about putting bums on seats, aren't they? They're not bothered what degree you get. But, you know, I'm not totally against it. Of course, we need certain people out there, but maybe 20%. But, as I sort of say, people with degrees don't build houses, don't earn fortunes of money. And there's such a massive skill shortage, and demand for tradesmen is going to be incredible. So, you know, like my children was too clever to go to university, if I'm being honest. They come and work for me.
Yeah, good lad, I like that. Right, this is another one from Rob. University lecturers spent most of lockdown at home and now they're on strike. They're absent from their student lives again, their students' lives again, apprenticeships to the new degrees. I'm going to you've got first-hand experience in this. How does it make you feel when you see university lecturers out on strike? You've had COVID, you've had... I don't know exactly what uni you're at, but the accommodation at a lot of universities is terrible, absolutely shocking. You're paying through the nose for it all, and then, you know, the Pink Hair Brigade all go out on strike. How does it make you feel?
I think for me, I think for many of the students as well, they feel like that the lecturers, they've been going on strike, but no one's actually standing up for the students in all of this. We're the ones that are being penalised, and throughout my entire degree as well, you know, we've been disrupted by so many strikes, and then, it does make people question, you know, what's the value in it? Because you've got, you know, sort of forces like the UCU getting involved in young people's education, when really, at the end of the day, we're trying to get our degrees, we're trying to learn, and then you sort of question, you're sort of paying a lot of money for a piece of paper in some aspects.
I'll tell you what, one thing now, just to round this off, actually. During lockdown, and I decided, well, I thought my career was over because of the nature of my work at the time I was freelancing, it had all gone to pot. And so I was like, well, I'm going to have to retrain. And many people watching this now will wish I had. But so I'm going to have to retrain. And I decided, all right, OK, I think I want to be a lawyer. And, I mean, I was there, I think I was into the university maybe 3 days out of a year, and it cost a heck of a lot of money to do that, and I didn't even end up going and bothering to get my graduation certificate. I did graduate, but you're right, that was a pointless piece of paper. But at the same time, I hold my hands up and say I was very fortunate enough to be able to actually go and do it. But there we go. Both of you, thank you very much. Lovely stuff, Charlie. Great, thank you very much. Charlie Mullins there of Pimlico Plumbers. Is it still Pimlico Plumbers? Are you out of that now?
No, I've sold it out.
You sold it, haven't you? Yeah.
Loads of dosh.
Just get an apprenticeship. Anyway, right.
I'm just saying it.
I know.
It happens to be that it works out well, and, you know, a lot of apprentices wind up getting their own business.
I know.
So
I think you're great. And Anna McGovern as well, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Now, I just want to tease ahead to some other stuff that I've got coming up. We are going to be talking about Lee Anderson, right? Lee Anderson yesterday was all over the news because they were talking about whether we should bring back the death penalty. And one thing that people ignored was that he also said we should put the Navy in the Channel, get a load of Channel migrants on it, take them to France and have a standoff with the French. Of course, the French, renowned for their historic military might, aren't they? So I imagine we would win that standoff. Although we could have a first-up, close-hand look at what a horrific war-torn nation France is and why these people are desperate to leave. Not. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Loads to come in the next hour. I've just rattled off one of those stories for you there. Next hour is debate, by the way, so hold on to your hats. Now, though, it's the weather.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update. Not much rain around this weekend, not a huge amount of sunshine either. It will be fairly cloudy, but for most of us it'll be a bit warmer than it has been for much of this week. Here's the reason for the dry weather, a big area of high pressure. But notice the isobars closely packed together across the north. It is very windy out there at the moment, and this weather front is still bringing some outbreaks of rain to the highlands of Scotland. That'll last for much of the evening. Still very gusty as well over northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The winds will slowly ease through the night. Further south, the winds are light. We could see a bit of mist and fog, but generally this cloud keeping the temperatures up well above freezing. We'll start the weekend at some 6s and 7s for most. So, as I said, much milder than many a morning has been this week. It will be a fairly grey day tomorrow, lots of cloud. We may continue to see some light rain and drizzle here and there, the hills of Wales, some western coasts, the highlands of Scotland, but for most it will be dry. And we should see something a bit brighter as well as the day goes on, the cloud breaking a little bit to reveal a little bit of blue sky here and there. And it will be quite mild for February, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13 degrees Celsius. Not a great deal of change during Saturday night. So if you're heading out, dry and predominantly cloudy, keeping things reasonably mild. Any breaks in the cloud could again allow temperatures to dip maybe close to freezing. And the thick cloud in the northwest of Scotland, where there will still be a brisk breeze blowing, may produce the odd spot of drizzly rain as we go into Sunday. But for most, again, the wind's light on Sunday, so lighter than today, and just a lot of cloud around, certainly over central and eastern parts further west and across parts of Scotland. Better chance on Sunday of seeing some longer spells of sunshine. And again, it will be on the mild side with temperatures mostly 9 to 11 degrees Celsius. That's all from me for now. Goodbye.
Tomorrow at 8 p.m, tune in to a GB News Investigates documentary as we tell the full story of the grooming gang scandal.
My childhood had been stolen.
We will expose the cover-ups that have kept this national scandal under wraps for decades.
Not one person has been held accountable.
Our investigation uncovers the true scale of this outrage.
I want to see senior officials held legally to account.
On GB News, grooming gangs, Britain's shame.
On GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hey, it's 5 o'clock, it's Friday, it's almost the weekend. In fact, technically, it's the end of the working week, so tell your boss to do one, put your feet up and just watch me for the next hour. The RMT union has rejected a new offer from Network Rail and train operating companies. General Secretary Mick Lynch is describing it as awful. Don't worry, I'm not going to dwell on the strike stuff. I'm really going to nose it on MPs' pay rises as well in light of all of that. I will, however, be speaking to a former General Secretary of the RMT next, so he's usually a bit spicy. Should MPs get that pay rise? 2.9% increase is less than what's been offered to the nurses and to rail workers, of course. It's less than inflation, massively less than inflation, but crucially, do they deserve it? Should they reject it in the midst of a cost of living crisis? We'll all discuss that later. Scientists at the University of Sydney say they've found a naturally occurring protein in the lungs that blocks COVID COVID-19. Some people would say then there's no need for the vaccine. Others would vehemently disagree. It may explain why some people never became sick with the virus, while other people did suffer serious illnesses. I've got all of that coming your way. We're also going to be having a big debate on whether or not we should be sending the Navy into the Channel, because Lee Anderson piped up on that. And I am asking as well, why is the music industry so weird? Lady Gaga had someone throw up on her on stage the other night, and Sam Smith is walking around like someone's not cooked a rolled-up joint of honey roast ham. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Should MPs refuse the pay rise? And should we put the Navy in the Channel while we're at it? Why not? Before that, though, it's your latest headlines with Bethany.
Patrick, thank you. It's 1 minute past 5. I am Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The number of people who've been killed following Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria has risen to more than 22,000. Rescue workers say the window for finding survivors is closing. But there are still glimmers of hope as several children have been pulled from the rubble today, including a 10-day-old baby and his mother, who were rescued after surviving 4 days in a collapsed building. An appeal by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has raised more than £30 million in its first 24 hours. Turkey's President Erdogan says rescue efforts aren't going as fast as he'd hoped.
Despite the fact that we've gathered perhaps one of the largest search and rescue teams to the region, with more than 141,000 members, unfortunately, it's a fact that we've not been able to respond as fast as we'd hoped.
In Syria, the head of the White Helmets response group has accused the UN of failing to deliver aid to rebel-held areas. He's called the response catastrophic, claiming the region had not received any support since the disaster struck. At least 3,000 people are known to have died in the country. The RMT has rejected the latest offers from both Network Rail and the train operating companies. The pay deal was 9% over 2 years, but the union's General Secretary says it doesn't meet expectations on job security or working conditions. But the Rail Delivery Group described their offer as fair and said some members will be deeply dismayed. Meanwhile, around 15,000 ambulance workers in England have been striking today in their dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. And more than 70,000 staff at 150 universities are walking out for the second day this week. The Chancellor has warned the UK isn't out of the woods yet after the latest figures show the economy narrowly avoided falling into recession in the final quarter of last year. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows the economy saw zero growth between October and December, but the overall annual GDP rate grew by 4.1%. Jeremy Hunt welcomed the figures but warns there's still more to be done.
The fact that we have avoided recession, in fact we're the fastest growing major country last year, shows there is underlying resilience in the UK economy. But we are not out of the woods. Inflation is still much too high. That is causing pain for families up and down the country, which is why we need to stick to our plan to halve inflation. If we do that and play to our strengths in science and technology, we really can be one of the most prosperous countries in Europe.
The government says it's been assured by every energy company in the UK that they will stop forcefully installing prepayment meters for vulnerable customers. The regulator, Ofgem, launched an investigation after reports not all suppliers were following the rules. Meanwhile, the Chancellor says there's no major new initiative to help those struggling with their bills when the price cap rises in April. Bills are set to increase from £2,500 to £3,000. Ukraine's Prime Minister says Russia has launched more than 50 missiles at the country today. Kyiv's Mayor Vitaly Klitschko claims 10 have been shot down over the capital. The attack has caused damage to power grids at 6 locations, but there are no confirmed casualties. Schools in Kyiv have been forced to evacuate and continue with their classes at an underground station. Meanwhile, Ukraine's president has addressed a UK-led summit to discuss Russia's participation at next year's Olympic Games in Paris. The International Olympic Committee says it's considering allowing athletes from Russia and Belarus to compete as neutrals. But the Lithuanian sports minister says all 35 countries that attended the summit agree with Volodymyr Zelensky that Russian and Belarusian athletes should be banned. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
Massive hour this, ladies and gentlemen. I'm with you all the way through till 6 o'clock. A little bit later on, I'm going to be talking to the one and only Kelly J. Keane. She's a big women's rights advocate, of course, and that's in relation to what Nicola Sturgeon is doing north of the border. The latest polling data as well, suggesting that Sturgeon is in trouble about that. I'm also going to be having a discussion about Lee Anderson, the Tory, backbench MP. He's deputy chair of the party now, isn't he? Yesterday, all the chat was about him thinking about bringing back the death penalty. Strong views on that. But he also said in the same interview that he wanted to put Royal Navy boats in the Channel and then have a standoff with the French over who should take the migrants. That went under the radar a little bit, so we're going to talk about that later on as well. And I've got much, much more for you. But it's interesting, this one at the top, and again, this has been a big one for you. Members of Parliament are to receive a 2.9% pay rise from the start of April. And it means that their salaries will rise from taking their pay from 84 grand to 86.5 grand, OK? So the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, they decided the increase. They claimed that it was in line with the average public sector workers' rise in 2022-23. Now, of course, MPs can reject this if they want to. They don't have to take this money. They could donate it to anyone. I imagine that none of them will, of course, but it comes at quite a poor time for the optics of all of this, because workers across the public sector, they're striking, they're demanding what they're saying fair pay rises to combat inflation and the cost of living crisis. In many cases, variety of different unions, as we know, but in many cases they want a pay rise to match inflation, to go above inflation. And it comes as the RMT has rejected the latest offers from both Network Rail and the train operating companies, which was a 9% pay rise over the course of 2 years. There were other little attachments to it as well. They've said that's not good enough. At least the RMT went on a bit of a roadshow about this, though, and kind of put it to their members. Apparently, ASLEF just rejected stuff outright. Joining me now, people may remember Steve Headley, who is the former Assistant General Secretary at the RMT Union. Steve, how are you today?
I'm good, Patrick. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Now, I'm hoping that we can make it through this interview, Steve, because the last time it got a little bit tense, and we don't need that, do we? So let's just start with the thing you were initially on to talk about, which is MPs' pay rises, 2.9%, that would take them up to about 86.5 grand a year. What do you think MPs should be paid?
Well, firstly, I think they should be paid to do one job, and I think 200 of them are already doing 2 or more jobs. So I've just checked this out, actually, and your viewers can check the facts. Some of them are earning up to £1 million doing other work rather than being an MP. So I think at a time when we're told there's no money for nurses and there's no money for the fire brigade and there's no money for other health professionals, that £2,000 pay rise for people who are already on 80 grand is really a non-starter.
So just to clarify that then, do you think that if you become an MP, you should only be able to be an MP? So you should have to quit your jobs elsewhere completely? Yeah? OK,
yes,
all right.
That's
Well, that's one view. There's a lot of people, by the way, in the inbox now saying that they do not rate this current crop of MPs whatsoever, and that is a bit of a slap in the face that they're getting any kind of pay rise. I suppose the other side of it, Steve, is that 2.9% is way below inflation. An independent body is the one that's decided that they can have this pay rise. Is it an example to other workers, Steve, that they should take a pay rise of around 2.9%, supposedly 9% has been offered over the course of 2 years too, and we're doing this seamlessly now, Steve. The RMT, who've rejected it.
OK, so the RMT leadership tried to sell this crock of a deal to the members, and the members rejected it overwhelmingly. They told them to take it back because what it actually means is inflation last year was 11.5%. This year it's already 10.5%. It may go up, it may go down, we don't know. But when inflation goes down, it doesn't mean prices come down. It just means they stop rising so quickly. So quite rightly, the RMT membership said that a 12% pay cut over 2 years is not acceptable in real terms. And also there was thousands of job cuts attached to that, and more weekends. At the minute, people can work 13 out of 20 weekends, that's already in a lot of people's rosters. They've got to work them, especially in engineering. And they want to make job cuts and make those that are left work even more weekends than that. So that's why it's been rejected overwhelmingly by the membership.
Can I just ask you to explain something for me, Steve? What is an unconditional pay offer? That's my understanding of what the RMT is saying. So we've said there, look, on paper, what the government are saying and the rail companies are saying is 9% over 2 years, a minimum of 1,750 quid for the lowest paid. They're saying no redundancies up to the point of next year. There's a couple of other bits and bobs attached to it as well. The RMT, as far as I can tell, have said we want an unconditional pay offer. What does that mean?
Right. Well, it just means that they're talking about pay and nothing else, because when they say there's no redundancies, what they're talking about is compulsory redundancies. So they're not saying that there's no redundancies, they're saying no compulsory redundancies, which is a bit of a red herring, because what they're going to try to do is get rid of people voluntarily. They'll either not replace people when they leave, or they'll offer a severance scheme where people will leave the industry, and that will leave the people that are left behind having to do more on social hours, more weekends, and worse shifts. And there's also the terms and conditions are involved. They want to rip up terms and conditions. So an unconditional pay offer means just talking about the quantum of pay and nothing else.
OK. One final one for you, Steve, if that's all right. What's the pension setup like if you're an RMT union member, if you work on the railways? I know I talk a lot about the nurses stuff. I mean, they are getting pensions way above what you would get in the private sector. People say they maybe should forego some of that. What's the setup if you work on the railways for the pension? Does the taxpayer pay for your pension?
No. Most railway workers are in a private, working for private companies and have been done for the past 27 years. So most people who have started on a railway in the past 30 years have never been in a public pension scheme. They've been in a private pension scheme. Network Rail might be a bit different, but you've also, but even then, you've got subsections of the pension scheme, and the average pension is about £10,000 a year. So we're not talking about some massive amounts that people are going to have a golden retirement, golden handshake with.
All right, Steve, look, thank you very much. I don't know whether or not you've got an identical twin, but this is a completely different interview to the one I did to you last time, and I must say I've enjoyed it. Cheers.
Well, you didn't come out with any racist jokes this time, Patrick.
I didn't come out with any last time either. We nearly made it through. We
all know you did.
All right, Steve, take care. Steve Headley, former Senior Assistant General Secretary, RMT Union. He's permanently on the wind-up, that guy. Right, anyway, joining me now is someone who thinks that MPs should be getting a pay rise. Rebecca Reid, author and broadcaster. Right, thank you very much. So, talk to me. You think MPs should be getting a pay rise? 2.9% is what they've been offered. People are saying, oh, they're all rubbish, pay them less.
So I would pay them considerably more overall, because I think the amount of money that you get paid as an MP means to only attract a very ambitious career politician. So the kind of person who has the option to go to a big finance company or a big legal career doesn't go into politics because they need to make money, particularly anybody who's saddled with student debt and has aspirations for a big career. So you get the egotists rather than the truly ambitious people. And because they get paid what to a lot of them doesn't feel like a lot of money, they then make lots of money from other sources. So I would say pay them 200 grand a year, but don't let them take a single penny for anything else at all, no other income.
OK, all right. So some people would say, though, that if they really do care about the people on the picket lines, especially potentially some of those ones in the Labour Party, you know, Solidarity, all of this stuff on the picket lines, then they should just forego this and they should maybe even donate it to the unions. Where would you stand on that?
I mean, you could do, but realistically, it's not going to make any difference. For most, when you're earning that much money, an extra 2-ish grand is not life-changing. So it's a big virtue signal. And also, again, a lot of these people make 2 grand for an after-dinner speech. So it's showing off, really, to say no to it.
What about expenses? You know, we're seeing some absolutely extortionate expenses bills in the hundreds of thousands, by the way. And, you know, MPs as well. It can open doors for you afterwards. The amount of book deals or appearances you get on to Strictly Come Dancing or In the Jungle or whatever, you know, afterwards. I suppose people would say, well, they're already getting all of their expenses, aren't they?
Which they shouldn't be. But again, you should pay them more money so that it is so that it's comparable to what they would be doing while they're working in law or finance. But then they should be paying for everything themselves. So much about being an MP would be so much easier if we just treated it like a normal job. I don't get, actually, well, for GB News I get sent a taxi, but broadly speaking, I have to get myself to work and I have to get myself home.
Yeah, I mean, there'll be a raffle of other GB News guests now who are up in arms that you've just said that, but there you go. We obviously think you're very special, Rebecca. But when it comes to other jobs, though, you said that and it's an interesting point, but does it all fall down in the sense that you need a qualification to do other jobs? You need to go and get some training, you need to go and work your way up. Technically speaking, anybody could become an MP, and not always the best person. There's been cases recently, haven't there, of a certain former Labour MP who was, using a lot of money for some other purposes. So actually just paying them more to attract the best wouldn't necessarily work if you compare it to other jobs where you actually need a skilled qualification to actually get that job.
I think one of the major problems of politics is the job that makes you good at being made... the skills that make you good at being made an MP and winning elections are so different from the skills that make you good at being an MP. And I'm not sure how you fix that problem. But winning an election is very different, or being liked is very different from being good.
One of my concerns is, though, that what we, as taxpayers, will be paying them to do is to do what they promised to do. And I am sick and tired. I suspect that we are on slightly different ends of the spectrum politically, but I am sick and tired, of them coming out and just saying one thing and then doing another. I mean, the big standout ones for me were the absolute haulics they managed to make of Brexit, the utter catastrophe that's taking place in the Channel, the tax stuff and all the... and in some cases, it is diametrically opposed to what they said they were going to do. So then idiots like me go out and we vote for them, and then they go, all right, we'll have a pay rise, and in some cases, we're doing the opposite of what we told you. In any other job, they'd walk.
But again, what we should be doing is looking to the best performing private sector companies and then emulating how they manage things, in which case maybe there should be a bonus structure for MPs. Maybe you don't get paid if you don't deliver on what you said you were going to. But we don't manage these people like any major company in the UK would manage their top tier employees. We just basically say, sure, have at it, get on with it and have some money.
OK, Rebecca, thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Rebecca Reid, author and broadcaster, regular on GB News. There we are. Right, that's responding to the idea of us potentially giving MPs a pay rise. We managed to kill two birds with one stone there, ladies and gentlemen. I know that you're all a bit sick of strikes. I'm absolutely sick of the strikes. However, it did break on this show that the RMT have biffed that pay offer. And we happen to have Steve Headley on as well, so why not bring it up with him? But yes, I do want your views on whether or not they should actually be getting a pay rise. Some people pointing out that actually the MP's pay rise takes them into around the same bracket as RMT boss Mick Lynch. So yes, OK, that has not been lost on me. But the other one I've been asking you, and it's something we're going to be talking about very, very shortly, is about whether or not we should be putting the Navy in the Channel. Now, Lee Anderson, he's been out and about. He's been saying, yes, I would put Navy boats in the Channel. I would get, obviously, people coming over on the boats onto said massive boat, and I would drive that boat towards France, where he would leave it and he'd have a standoff with the French. Now, can I just say, I think that's possibly quite a popular view with a lot of people. In practical reality, maybe it's not a goer. But a wider point on Lee Anderson. I couldn't help but notice that yesterday it was all about the death penalty thing. Now, if anyone had really bothered to look at the polls on the death penalty, as we did on this show, it's very much all to play for when it comes to a referendum on the death penalty. It's about 50-50. So this idea that only bloodthirsty idiots want to see a return of the death penalty is basically calling 50% of the British public bloodthirsty idiots. What a lot of people do want is for someone to be tough on law and order and for predatory paedophiles and serial killers and rapists to not see the light of day again, or indeed, in some cases, go and hang around their victims, or people in grooming gangs, for example. And when we have a situation where people don't feel law and order is being taken care of, people want to call for things like the death penalty. Lee Anderson was not out of touch when he was calling for the death penalty. When it comes to sorting out the Channel, plenty of people are bang in favour of offshore processing. They are sick and tired of seeing people coming over here. They're sick and tired of taxpayers' money being spent on it. And they're sick and tired of our border force and our RNLI Coast Guard being used as some kind of Uber service for illegal immigration. So therefore, the idea of putting in a Navy frigate and parking it up to the French, who, by the way, we are paying handsomely to do naff all about this crisis, is, again, not an unpopular idea. And just listen to the amount of people who are coming out, all your usual suspects, your political types, your holier-than-thou worthy people, go, oh, my gosh, isn't this just such a cretinous, idiotic idea? You just know that those people have never been for a pint of ale in a Midlands or a Northern pub, and that is why they are bang out of touch. I'll just say it. I think more people should listen to more people like Lee Anderson. Coming up, though, scientists claim to have found a naturally occurring protein that can combat the effects of COVID-19. I'll be speaking to a microbiologist to get the latest on that. But before that, I've got your weather.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update. Not much rain around this weekend, not a huge amount of sunshine either. It will be fairly cloudy, but for most of us it'll be a bit warmer than it has been for much of this week. Here's the reason for the dry weather, a big area of high pressure. But notice the isobars closely packed together across the north. It is very windy out there at the moment, and this weather front is still bringing some outbreaks of rain to the highlands of Scotland. That'll last for much of the evening. Still very gusty as well over northern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland. The winds will slowly ease through the night. Further south, the winds are light. We could see a bit of mist and fog, but generally this cloud keeping the temperatures up well above freezing. We'll start the weekend at some 6s and 7s for most. So, as I said, much milder than many a morning has been this week. It will be a fairly grey day tomorrow, lots of cloud. We may continue to see some light rain and drizzle here and there, the hills of Wales, some western coasts, the highlands of Scotland, but for most it will be dry. And we should see something a bit brighter as well as the day goes on, the cloud breaking a little bit to reveal a little bit of blue sky here and there. And it will be quite mild for February, 10, 11, 12, maybe 13 degrees Celsius. Not a great deal of change during Saturday night. So if you're heading out, dry and predominantly cloudy, keeping things reasonably mild. Any breaks in the cloud could again allow temperatures to dip maybe close to freezing. And the thick cloud in the northwest of Scotland, where there will still be a brisk breeze blowing, may produce the odd spot of drizzly rain as we go into Sunday. But for most, again, the wind's light on Sunday, so lighter than today, and just a lot of cloud around, certainly over central and eastern parts further west and across parts of Scotland. Better chance on Sunday of seeing some longer spells of sunshine. And again, it will be on the mild side with temperatures mostly 9 to 11 degrees Celsius. That's all from me for now. Goodbye.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview channel 236.
And YouView channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Loads of meaty stuff to come, ladies and gentlemen. We've got our big Navy in the Channel discussion. We're also going to be speaking to the fantastic women's rights advocate Kelly J. Keane, a massive fan favourite here on GB News, about the utter madness that's taking place in Scotland. Why? Well, because opinion polling data has come and it absolutely gives Sturgeon a kicking, which I think plenty of people love to see. But before that, scientists at the University of Sydney claim to have found a naturally occurring protein in the lungs that blocks COVID-19. Now, the protein, LRRC15, which sounds a bit like a Star Wars character, combats the virus by attaching itself to the COVID particles and blocking their contact with other vulnerable cells. Basically, in a nutshell, if I've read it right, and I might get corrected, is this kind of a natural immunity type of thing. With me now is Dr. Andrew Preston, microbiologist at the University of Bath. Look, thank you for this. I saw this article earlier on, and I was quite intrigued by it, OK, because what does this imply? Does this imply now that people who I suspect are already no longer afraid of COVID can just officially be even less afraid of it?
No, I don't think it changes that. But I think it does offer potentially a new therapeutic window, and also perhaps starts towards understanding something that's been puzzling us since the start of the pandemic, why some people become particularly ill with COVID and others seem to be completely unaffected. And so, as you say, this protein appears to be expressed on cells that are not necessarily that vulnerable to the virus. So it can sort of mop up the virus and stop it from infecting the neighboring cells. And there is other studies that have tied the level of this protein to the severity of COVID observed in people. So if you have, in those with severe COVID, they seem to express less of this protein compared to those that...
Can I just ask you about this? So the people who, let's be honest, were probably going to get very, very ill from COVID have already in the past either died or got very, very ill from COVID. So if that hasn't happened to you yet, and we know that this particular protein exists, etc., is there an argument to say people don't need to go out and get more vaccines? Because if you were going to get very ill from it, it would have happened.
No, we're not at a stage to be able to say that. And again, that's not the point of this particular study. Again, it highlights a new type of immune receptor that appears to be able to mop up virus particles and keep them away from more vulnerable cells. So, I mean, I think the interest in that is whether that is exploitable as a potential new therapeutic, not necessarily just against COVID, but other future viruses. So it opens up that, as well as perhaps that more sort of now slightly historical question of why do some people with seemingly similar levels of exposure to the virus suffer more badly than others. So I don't think it's really going to influence the decision-making of people, because, again, I think it would be a very large step to go from previous experience with the virus to saying, well, I've definitely got more LRRC15. I think that would be hazardous to make that leap.
Just forgive me for asking this question. It might sound a bit simplistic. It wouldn't be the first time on this show, to be fair. Why should I still care about COVID?
Well, it's completely up to you. We've been asked to make our own decisions. Again, I'm not quite sure where this line of questioning has come from. This study is not about whether people should care or worry about COVID. It's about answering a scientific question that's been long-standing. And of course, what can we do with this discovery to help us maybe deal better with other viruses that are either ongoing or emerging in the future? I don't think it's necessarily being used here to either, augment or ridicule public health measures. I'm not quite sure where you're coming from on this.
No, I'm just intrigued by it, really, because I think a lot of people have already maybe perhaps stopped caring a bit about it, and now this is more kind of good news in terms of the fact that we can maybe potentially move on from it, is all I'm getting at. But Dr. Andrew, thank you very, very much. Dr. Andrew Preston there, microbiologist at the University of Bath, just reacting to that Australian scientist's claim to have found the fact that there's a COVID-fighting protein that exists within our cells, which is quite nice news, actually. Look, when I come back, we are going to be talking a lot about this Lee Anderson story. I've been teasing it for a long time, but we've had to jig things around a bit, and we're going to do that very, very shortly. He's the new deputy chairman of the Tory party, so he's called for migrants to be returned on Royal Navy frigates and then be sent back to France on the same day. Some people have said, well, this would cause a massive diplomatic crisis, wouldn't it? I'm not sure it actually would for a long period of time. And the reason being is because if you follow the Lee Anderson logic, it would all stop quite soon, wouldn't it? Because the human traffickers and the people queuing up on the beaches of Calais and Dunkirk would realise that they're not going to get anywhere, so they might stop coming. I did also speak to an immigration lawyer earlier on, and I thought this was fascinating. He was saying to me, well, actually, Patrick, if you did take them back into French waters, European waters, then if they wanted to claim some kind of human rights infringement, they would then be doing it on the basis of dealing with French immigration lawyers or human rights lawyers or EU human rights lawyers, who basically would probably come down on the side of the fact that they have to locate themselves somewhere around the continent, i.e. not in Britain. I think that actually is quite an intriguing idea. And again, a lot of people are sneering at Lee Anderson. I think that is bang out of order. Lots of you have been getting in touch on this very, very issue. How about putting Lee Anderson up for Prime Minister, says JB. At least he's working class with his feet on the ground and he understands the people. And that, I suspect, is why a lot of people don't like him. I think a lot of people can't quite get their heads around why someone like Lee Anderson, who's for all intents and purposes quite a normal bloke, who thinks like a lot of normal people, would actually do so well. And I think, yes, potentially Lee Anderson for PM. It could well be a thing, though. Watch this space, because if Lee Anderson, if let's say the Tories lose the next election and then Lee Anderson ends up running and the Tories revert back to their usual way of electing their leader, which is to go to the membership, I suspect the membership might actually vote for Lee Anderson. That would be absolutely magnificent, wouldn't it? Can you imagine? Right, I've got all that coming your way and much, much more. But first, it's your headlines with Bethany.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening. It's 5:30. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. The number of people who've been killed following Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria has risen to more than 22,000. Rescue workers say the window for finding survivors is closing, but there are still glimmers of hope as several children have been pulled from the rubble today, including a 10-day-old baby and his mother, who were rescued after surviving 4 days in a collapsed building. An appeal by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has raised more than £30 million in its first 24 hours. The RMT has rejected the latest offers from both Network Rail and the train operating companies. The pay deal was 9% over 2 years, but the union's General Secretary says it doesn't meet expectations on job security or working conditions. Meanwhile, around 15,000 ambulance workers in England have been striking today in their dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. And more than 70,000 staff at 150 universities are walking out for the second day this week. The Chancellor has warned the UK isn't out of the woods yet after the latest figures show the economy narrowly avoided falling into recession in the final quarter of last year. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows the economy saw zero growth between October and December. The overall annual GDP rate, however, grew by 4.1%. And Ukraine's Prime Minister says Russia has launched more than 50 missiles at the country today. Kyiv's Mayor Vitaly Klitschko claims 10 have been shot down over the capital. The attack has caused damage to power grids at 6 locations, but there are no confirmed casualties. Schools in Kyiv have been forced to evacuate and continue with their classes at an underground station. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Patrick will be back with you in just a moment.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate. with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Tomorrow at 8 p.m, tune in to a GB News Investigates documentary as we tell the full story of the grooming gang scandal.
My childhood had been stolen.
We will expose the cover-ups that have kept this national scandal under wraps for decades.
Not one person has been held accountable.
Our investigation uncovers the true scale of this outrage.
I want to see senior officials held legally to account.
On GB News, grooming gangs, Britain's shame.
All right, people, I always like to load the end of the show with the topics I think you really care about most. And today we've got the potential demise of Nicola Sturgeon, with it possibly the end of Scottish independence and the end to the nonsense about whether or not women are women, which, of course, they definitely are. So there we go. Also, I'm going to be talking about Lee Anderson's frigates in the Channel. We've got a guest on that. Should we be putting the Navy in to have a standoff with the French? I mean, we're already staring down the barrel of World War III with the Russians. Why not do it with the French as well? And to wrap it all off, is Sam Smith OK? The music industry's gone a bit weird, if you ask me. Lady Gaga had someone throw up on her last night. Sam Smith as well on top of that. He's been walking around looking like a kind of half-baked joint of honey roast ham, hasn't he? So we'll be talking about that. But yes, firstly, it's up to Scotland, because Scotland might not be totally in favour of Nicola Sturgeon's approach to transgender rights. In fact, that's putting it mildly, because it looks as though Sturgeon might get biffed. A new poll from the publication Unheard found that in aggregate, Scottish people are also more trans-sceptical than the English people. So Nicola Sturgeon has chosen a hill to die on that betrays, some would argue, what she is, which is a woman, and also the vast majority of Scottish people, which is not really great politics. It's all in the wake of this gender recognition reform bill. I'm going to go to my guest now without much more dither and delay. It is the wonderful founder of Standing for Women. It is Kelly J. Keane. Kelly, this poll now is official. You can now, with actual hard data in your hand, say what you kind of already knew, which is that the vast majority of people, not just in England, but definitely in Scotland as well, fundamentally disagree with the idea that a male rapist should be allowed into a woman's space.
Well, who knew that most of the UK would actually know what a woman was and wouldn't want to put women in unnecessary danger? I think we all knew, right? I think what's really interesting with that poll, I really didn't like any of the language. Calling people trans-sceptical is just nonsensical. Realist, I thought, would be a more accurate description. But of the people that strongly disagree with the idea of keeping men out of women's spaces. So there was a question that called, I think, transgender women, so men, and would we like those men in women's changing rooms? And I think 22% said yes, or it might have been more than that. And I think what's interesting is I suspect out of those 22%, about 90% of those people genuinely think somebody referred to as a transgender woman is a man who's had his penis removed. And 90%, at the very least, 90% of men who call themselves women have no such alteration whatsoever. So we're talking about men with penises.
Yeah, indeed. And I can't help but wonder as well where this really starts, Kelly, because these numbers, I suspect, unfortunately, there's going to end up being more people who, despite your best efforts, who go, for want of a better phrase, go soft on this stuff. Because it's starting in schools, isn't it? And we're even seeing now, nominated for a Children's Book of the Year award by Waterstones, is a book that has a diagram of a very young girl with My Imaginary Willie on it. And I just think, and parents aren't allowed to pull their kids out of pride marches and stuff. I just think, is this not indoctrination at this stage now?
Oh, it's 100% indoctrination. I think we don't know just how far that goes. And it starts with sort of ripples of LGBT inclusion, and it ends up with overtly sexualized images and harmful ideas to really, really small children. So part of that diagram was also things like pointing to bits of a female body, saying that it was disgusting, or it was vile, or needed removing, or just that sort of stuff. We dealt with a long time ago, like in my youth, we dealt with anorexia and bulimia. Now that still is the biggest harm to teenage girls, but we banned all those anorexia websites, those sort of websites that promoted it. And as far as I'm aware, we never promoted that in schools. There weren't teachers talking about how stunning and brave having anorexia was. And we've just got, it's just authoritarian, horrible echoes of the Red Army.
Can I ask you, this is, I think, an interesting point that I'd love your view on, which is, how do you feel about women who do not support you in terms of the definition of adult human female and what a woman is? About women who would be happy to let, well, essentially me, really, into a woman's changing room?
I feel very sad, disappointed, and really quite angry. And I wonder what the driving force is. And I've thought about this a lot. Like, why do some women go along with our demise? And I think it's, some people talk about it's just about being killed last. And some people, I think it's social currency. I think right now, it's really important to be liked. And perhaps it always was really important, more important for women to be liked. And we have to pass tests in our social circles in order to be liked. Don't be too confident, don't be too beautiful, don't be too quiet, don't be too courageous, don't be too meek. And you lovely men, you don't have those sort of standards. You take each other a little more as you find each other. So I think it's social currency for women.
OK, well, look, thank you very much, Kelly. And talking of popularity as well, it obviously is... I mean, it's a crying shame, isn't it, that Nicola Sturgeon appears to have picked the wrong fight here. You hate to see it. Kelly J. Keane there, founder of Standing for Women. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure, Kelly. Right, OK, so moving on now. Another big one there. So I've been teasing this throughout. You're welcome now, ladies and gentlemen. It's happening. Newly appointed Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson has called for migrants who illegally crossed the Channel to be returned to France the same day aboard a Royal Navy frigate. He then said, essentially, let's have it out with the French. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has made tackling the crisis one of his 5 priorities, which you can definitely condense into just being 3 priorities. The Royal Navy was previously responsible for operations in the Channel. It handed that responsibility over to the Home Office, which a lot of people regard as an absolute shambles, and essentially nothing's happened. With me now is Tony Smith, CBE, former Director General of the UK Border Force. Tony, great to have you on the show. First things first, would you actually be dead against the idea of a Royal Navy frigate picking up Channel migrants and just parking itself near a beach in Calais?
So, Patrick, I think the first thing I would say is I have a huge amount of respect for Lee Anderson. I think he's been a real breath of fresh air to our politics. He's on the Home Affairs Committee and he's done it like me. He's done his homework. He's been over to Calais. He's had a look round and he's formed opinions, which I think are many of which are valid in terms of trying to stop the votes, which he, like me, wants to do. I think the difficulty is here with this particular proposal, Patrick, is that if we were able to do this, and I'm sure Priti Patel would have done it, or Suella Braverman would have done it by now, there are very significant problems in international law in what we can and what we can't do in each other's waters. So what we really need, and what I've been advocating ever since the boat started 4 years ago, is a joint agreement with the French. We could have joint patrols, we could have joint returns. All of these things could be done with agreement. But from what I understand he's saying is, well, let's just send we've had the Navy out there already. They didn't really make much difference because they
I think the point of difference that he's saying is, from what I can gather anyway, from what he's saying, is he would actually take that Navy boat into French waters and park it there until the French decided they were going to take it back. Now, I think the other point for what Lee Anderson is saying is, actually, we wouldn't have to do this very many times before the Channel migrant crisis stopped. That's his view, of course. It's that visible deterrent, and they will be able to see people actually being sent back. Two things there. Do you think it would be a deterrent? And B, do you care what the French think about it?
Well, on the second point, I do care what the French think about it. I think they would have something to say if we were to start taking warships into their territorial waters with migrants on board without proper due process of legal process. But I think the second thing is, look, you know, we do need to start returns, though, Patrick. He's right on that. We've got to start sending people back. And this is not just a problem in the UK. I was out on the southern border just last week chairing a border conference with the Border Patrol. 3 million detections this year coming in from Mexico. Another 600,000 getaways, 330,000 people crossing the EU front. A meeting yesterday in the EU where they're even talking about beefing up returns. So the problem becomes the receiving countries' capacity to send people back to the source and transit countries. This requires a global response, and I think it is a little bit, it's a little bit unfair that the EU would complain that people, are coming through other source and transit countries into their territory, and they want them to take them back, and they're not prepared to take people back.
But Tony, the EU, honestly, they don't seem to care about themselves. I mean, the absolute gall of the European Union to allow us to have been the initial, us and America, being the initial countries, pretty much the only two initial countries that bothered to help Ukraine out. The EU was prepared, fully prepared, to have let Putin take Ukraine and then mop up the humanitarian disaster afterwards. Oh, we'll take X amount of Ukrainian refugees. What about actually stopping Putin out of Ukraine? And then the argument is we need to send in fighter jets and we need to send all this stuff because Putin won't stop at Ukraine. He'll run roughshod across Europe. If they were that scared about it, you think they'd be more inclined to send something more than 10,000 rainbow-coloured helmets? Or anyway, I'm ranting now, but I am angry about this. And the other point here is that, seriously, why should we mop up the tail end of the migrant crisis for them as well? We are paying the money. We paid the EU 2.3 billion quid today, actually, for some dodgy trade deal we did with China. Can't they do a bit more for us? And if they don't, well, why not send in a warship?
Well, one would hope so, Patrick, but the fact is we can't control what they do. We can only control what we do. And there are things that we do need to do, and that's to start sending people back. Now, I've already advocated a detain fast-track process for Albania. We could detain them and send them straight back to Tirana straight away. I don't know why that's not happening yet. Rwanda goes on and on and on through reports when really we should have been able to fix that. Now, we have a government committed to take. So there are things that I think the Home Office, the government could and should do within its own gift that it really needs to focus, in addition to trying to persuade source and countries to work with us.
You know why I think people are afraid of Lee Anderson, by the way, Tony, is because of a point you made early doors, which is that he's bothered to go to Calais, so he's had a look at it, and he's exposed what a lot of people would argue is a bit of a racket, actually, involving certain humanitarian charities out there, which are doing everything they possibly can to get them in there. And people are worried that if someone like Lee Anderson keeps speaking up, they're going to have uncomfortable conversations like, oh, maybe this lot who have all the big rainbow flags and the refugees welcome sign, maybe actually they are actually doing things wrong. But there we go. Tony, thank you very much. Tony Smith, CBE, former Director General of UK Border Force. Now, we thought we'd finish on something a little bit different, ladies and gentlemen, and it's been something that's been getting to me a bit recently, and it is just the state of the music industry. I know that the music industry has always had very colourful characters, it's always pushed boundaries, it's art, it's creativity, it's all of that. But the singer Sam Smith has made headlines recently for performing in a Satanist outfit. That's not where the controversy... Oh, my God. So controversy surrounding the Latch singer ends. Now the singer has appeared on the front cover of, I think, the ironically named Perfect magazine, donning red heels, lingerie, and what can only be described as, well, it's Honey Roast Sam, isn't it? It's Honey Roast Sam in a raunchy pose. But I thought, you know, who am I to criticise about all of this? Who am I to say that that doesn't look good? I wonder what I look like with my clothes off in a very similar outfit to Sam Smith. So earlier on, just right here in the GB News newsroom, I did exactly the same thing as Sam Smith, and this is Crispy Christys. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. That's Crispy Christys there for you. So, hey, you know what? It's harder than it looks to be Sam Smith, isn't it? But, yes, there we are. Anyway, right, so what's going on with our celebrities? Because also, as well, Lady Gaga, and just, I can't believe it's happening either, got someone to throw up on her on stage the other day. With me now is showbiz journalist Rebecca Twomey. Rebecca, thank you very much. Is it just me, or has Sam Smith and Lady Gaga lost the plot?
Well, let's just say they like attention. And I think in a world where we're saturated with celebrities now, we've got more celebrities than ever before. Music artists can't just make money off selling their music. They've got to be these bigger than life characters. They've got to have these phenomenal shows, because performing is actually how they make their money now. And that's how they sell records, not the other way around. So they have to work extra, extra hard. Now, someone like Sam Smith, they've got a big record out at the moment. And
it's got more than just a big record.
Incredible publicity. Doing a cover like that is a great way to actually sell music. As shocking as that may seem to all of us, it does seem ludicrous, doesn't it?
Sorry, can you just explain to me, by the way, I don't think that every Tom, Dick and Harry should be seen as a role model for kids. That gets wheeled out every time someone who once appeared on Coronation Street gets done for doing something naughty at the weekend. They go, oh, and he was the role model for the kid. No, he wasn't. He played a character in a soap opera. I get all of this, but then they lose that argument, the likes of Sam Smith, when they do try to lecture us on a variety of different political issues. You could argue then they do become a role model. And I'm sorry, but, I mean, he's just dressed up as Satan, and then he's dressed up as whatever the heck that is. And do kids really... Is this a role model for kids?
Well, of course not. I'm not going to start defending saying someone should be dressing up as Satan and that's a great role model. But I think the thing with celebrity is that it is a modern religion. With decline in religion, celebrities become godlike to people. And what I find particularly bizarre, even though I am a showbiz journalist, is that people look to celebrities to tell them what's right and what's wrong. They look at them as these figures that are godlike, that can do no wrong. They're very rich, they're powerful, they're often very attractive. That's up for debate, and certain characters we've just discussed. But what the public really want is they want their celebrities to be mummy and daddy and to tell us the rights and the wrongs. So celebrities are playing into this pantomime as well, particularly music artists, because it's very hard to sell music these days. So they've got to push even harder. Someone like Lady Gaga, you know, this is a character who came onto the scene in these ludicrous outfits and with a meat dress. She has to keep pushing the boundaries to get attention.
I get that, but who is advising these people? Who said to her? I tell you what, when we're playing this show right now, and what I want from you is I want you to play the drums, and we're going to bring in lovely little Svetlana here. Svetlana's going to come over, and Svetlana's going to throw up on you. It's mad. Is there what? Who's coming? Does anyone stop to check whether or not these people are all right?
Well, I think it's just very much like, let's see the reaction on social media. The more reaction, the more debate, the more shock, the more horror that people react with, the better it is for the artist. So it's not about whether, oh, this is a great idea, it's going to be a great performance, or I'm going to look great. It's actually about what's going to create me the most attention, the most headlines, and the most reaction on social media, the most shares. It's really sad that in this case, it's not about the music anymore, because Sam Smith is a phenomenal singer, as is Lady Gaga. And if they just focused on the music, I think we'd all be entertained a lot more than these stunts that just don't seem to really add very much apart from controversy.
Rebecca, thank you very, very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Rebecca Twomey there, who is a showbiz journalist. Just before I go to Michelle, is there any chance we can bring up, again, my hot take on Sam Smith? So Sam Smith, we all saw, it was Honey Roast Sam, wasn't it? I decided I'd strip off earlier and do my take on it. And that's Crispy Christys, everybody. There we go. That is me doing my impression of Sam Smith. Right, Jubes & Co is next, and Michelle is in the studio with me right now. Michelle, do you think the world's gone mad?
No, but I think that was quite an improvement, that picture of you just then. Looked quite good to me.
Oh, the diet's kicked in.
I tell you what, though, Patrick, there are moments in time where you just realise, A, you're getting old, and B, you're just not cool. And when I look at that Sam Smith stuff, I just tick both of those boxes. I look at that, I don't connect with it, and it just
I don't think anyone does.
I'm getting old, and I'm getting uncool. Just give me Roy Orbison any day.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have behaved like that, would he?
No, he wouldn't have behaved like that. I miss that kind of stuff. Exactly. That's kind of why I just listen to Motown, because I'm not being funny as well, but all of Sam Smith's stuff, as far as I can tell, just sounds exactly the same. When I have the misfortune of flicking on Radio 1, it's just a variation on the same theme. Anyway, what's coming up?
Well, one of the things that I want to get into tonight is half of Brits, right, cannot remember the last time that they laughed out loud.
Oh.
So I'm determined to see whether or not I can laugh out loud, because I don't really laugh at anything other than you've been framed and people falling over, really. So I want lots of people's jokes, but I want to get into tax bullying and how much teachers should get involved when pupils are fighting. Do we just have a walk on by? And my two panellists tonight, I love them, Paul Embry and Alex Dean.
Fantastic. No, that's going to be great. And I think that last one as well about teachers, mark my words, that story at Ashford in Kent, in Surrey, that's going to become a much bigger story than it is just now. Right, Jubes & Co up next. Look, thank you very much. I've had a wonderful week. I hope you have as well. I will be back with you on Monday at 3 p.m. Have a fabulous weekend, people. Love you lots. Mwah.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane.